Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Turn Out a Punk. And today on the show, it's the longest episode I've ever done. This has shattered the record from the band, for good reason, because from the band, Sweet Baby, aka Sweet Baby Jesus, from the band Soup, from the band Samiam, from the band Knapsack, from the Ways Away, Sergie Loobkoff is on the show. And this is a monster of an episode. This is someone who I've wanted to talk to for a while. This is one of those ones where I thought it would go one way. It went all sorts of other awesome ways as well. I'm leaving some bands out there. This guy's got enough bands and enough history to do like 3 or 4 episodes of this length. But we will get to it in 1 second. First, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address turnoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me. Thank you very much, Tristan, for all the hard work you do. There's also a Facebook page, a YouTube page, a TikTok page, an Instagram page, all for this podcast. All those can be found at Turn Out a Punk on those platforms. I'm putting up a ton of videos. You can also see those on my Instagram or Twitter at Left for Damian. If you want to support the show, please tell all your friends about it. If you want to sponsor it, get in touch about that too. That'd be cool, but no pressure on that. Tell your friends about it. Let them all know. I play in a band. We are called Fucked Up. You can find out more information at fuckedup.cc. It's the 10th anniversary of our album Glass Boys. I just found out. I had no idea. So do me a favor, and if you like that record, go back and listen to it. If you didn't like it, give it another shot. I went back and re-listened to it. A couple clunkers, but overall, I think it's one of my favorite Fucked Up records. And that's, if I dare say so myself. We also have some shows announced. We're going to be going into the U.S. and then some Canadian dates as well. You can find those over there at fuckedup.cc, and more info to come. No spoilers, but more info to come. I think that's it. All right, on to today's show. As I said off the top, Sergie Loobkoff is here, and this is someone who, my gosh, is a dream guest for this show. Talk about history. Sweet Baby, a.k.a. Sweet Baby Jesus, was signed to Ruby Records, the subsidiary of Slash Records, plus Lookout, plus all the stuff he did afterwards. This is a good one. I don't want to spoil it. There's a lot that gets covered in this one. The guy's a legend. Like, so many bands, so many incredible bands, so many incredible pieces of music. Soup, largely inactive for a very long time. Kind of the forgotten band of the original Gilman scene, like a foundational band. We talk a lot about it, but you can find their stuff online. I think completely out of print. A lot of the other bands that we talk about too, that stuff's out of print. Hopefully it comes back into print at some point. I think there was on a Crimp Shrine box that someone did years ago. I think there was like a bonus thing that had some of these bands on it that Sergie played in way back when. But otherwise, that stuff's long out of print. Samiam, of course, though, is on the move. They've got some shows coming up. You can find out more information over at Samiam on Instagram, and there's also samiam.band on Instagram. There's also like a web presence for this band. You can find out lots of stuff. They've got some reissues coming out, as well as they've got some tour dates in the Midwest. No, Northwest. Sorry, my directions are all fucked up. With Off With Their Heads, so check them out in live. Also, Ways Away is the new project that Sergie's in with Jared, like kind of a super group over here. They have a social media page. They're going to be doing some more stuff, I think, very soon. They've announced some stuff coming up, but they've got some shows in June as well. So head on over to Ways Away Band on Instagram, or they're on all the social media things as well. And Knapsack, I think, is right now currently inactive. Or before I say that, let me just double check. Yeah, I don't think they've got any shows coming up or anything like that, but they have some reissues, and obviously a seminal band I could just go on all day just reading Sergie's Discogs page, but you'll hear me do that in a second on the show. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Check out all this man's bands. I think it's his dog too on Instagram. I'll put the link to that in the bottom as well. I'm excited for you to hear this one. This is a great one. And that's it for me. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Sergie Loobkoff on Turned Out a Punk. Sergie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, this is a big thrill for me because I like, we were talking off air and about like you were like, curious about why Tristan and I are so excited about having you on this show. To me, your career going back to like Soup to like Bugger All to like all that, like Sweet Baby Jesus, Sweet Baby, like all that stuff to me. And that's just your prologue to like your career in music.
Were you aware of Soup as a young guy, like when it was happening?
No, I kind of show up like just pre Green Day exploding. Like I got into it through 1991, the year punk broke, that Sonic Youth movie.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was on video by that point. And so I got into it, seeing Dinosaur Jr., that was like my first show. Sonic Youth, and then Sonic Youth was kind of like a way in, but that Sweet Baby record, my brother, I think it was Tristan, picked it up used really early because, well, we'll get into that in a second, but I feel like, especially with Soup was a band that I learned about from doing this show, and now what is it, like Crimpsoupyvyocracy, right? That was, they called you guys the Big Four?
It was three. It was Crimpsoupocracy.
Operation Ivy's in there too.
They might have started kind of try to squeeze up Ivy in after.
Yes.
It came a little later.
Yeah.
And of course eclipsed us like exponentially. But so the bass player of Soup was my friend Richie, who's the guy that drew the cover, Dookie. And he was really good friends with Aaron Elliott, who even back then, we're talking like mid to late 80s or like 87, 86, he already had a name for himself with Comet Bus, at least where I'm from, right? And then the band thing came a little bit later. Like he was sort of like a celebrity fan, at shows, right?
Yeah.
And he grew up a block away from my brother and I. And he was sort of like more like a hippie than a punker growing up. But we didn't really know him until the Gilman times. We sort of like, ooh, there's like, I don't think punk was what we were thinking, but like a cool person, like, not a cool person, like a nerd, but like a counterculture kind of cool person, right? Which we were 14 or 12 or whatever old we were. We didn't understand what cool really was, but we already knew that we didn't think being within society was cool. We thought counterculture was cool, or being different was cool, which maybe was a hangover from hippie days that was like in Berkeley that sort of like was imposed us, or it was just the way we were innately, I'm not really sure. But anyway, Aaron Elliott had that band, Crimpsoupivyocracy, and then me and Richie had Soup, and then in the outer suburbia there was Isocracy, and we just played a show at a party that we somehow invited Isocracy to play. This is all before Gilman, and we just played a show. It's a party, and it's like 40 people, but we just decided like, oh my God, we were all three of these bands were doing this kind of in a vacuum. And we discovered like that the three of us we're like a sardine in a giant ocean. And we found two other sardines or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And all it was like a sticker. We made it. Aaron Elliott, he like was kind of a master marketer, going back from even then. And he had the idea of making a sticker that he put over a matchbook. And that was like, and it said, said that on it, and it put all our bands together. And it was like, and then when Gilman opened up, then it was like, oh shit, these two bands are already friends. And it was all like, poof, like a little teeny little scene of people doing this. It was kind of, I don't know why I'm blabbing about this, but
No, this. What are you talking about? This is what I live for. This is why I'm
okay.
up late at night after putting my kids to bed before I have to get up early the next morning, because this is like manna from heaven for me.
But Up Ivy, although it might have gotten squeezed in like in a little teeny bit of revisionist history later somehow, um, they just came in later, like after Gilman, and immediately like shined way brighter than any of those other three bands, like way brighter. Like I went to Up Ivy's first show. I have two claims to fame in punk rock. One was that I went to Up Ivy's first show, which was in Dave Mello, the drummer's parents' basement, right across the street from my high school. And there's 14 people or less. And I remember thinking, oh, they're pretty good, they're pretty good. Whatever, like not really paying attention. But then also all of a sudden, like a pit started in a garage with 14 people. And I was like, oh, what is going on? Because that never happened for Crimpsoupivyocracy or Isocracy or Soup before in any environment. They were like, wait, this is a real band. And I was like, ooh. Like immediately they shined. Whereas, you know, Isocracy had their day, but Crimpsoupivyocracy and Soup didn't really have their day at all, really. You know.
Well, I think I feel like you guys out of all of them didn't really get acknowledged because, and this is me, temporally removed and geographically removed, but it was like,
You're looking in hindsight too. So
yeah, absolutely.
I already know you're going to say a bunch of shit that blows it out of proportion, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, I do love the record, but I think part of the reason the record is kind of under heralded is because Very Small didn't have the reach that Lookout did, especially post the Operation IVLP.
But we weren't even on Very Small. Like they put out our 7-inch or whatever. Like I think maybe right before we broke up, or even after we broke up. Like even if they had reached, like there wasn't anything to capitalize on.
I that 7-inch is very high on my want list still, and it never shows up. You never see that thing.
No one knows about it. But
Well,
like
people know about it. It goes for like $200 now, or like $150. So people know about it.
I've never heard that, but that's kind of neat.
Yeah, well,
it would be totally stoked. Like for like that, we were like friends, but I was sort of an outsider. Like I got brought into that group of, it was 4 of us. And then I did a lot of musical stuff afterwards, like I guess we'll talk about. And they didn't. So like I think looking back, like that was like for some of the guys were sort of like the one that got away a little bit. Like, oh wow, so it could have been like whatever.
It's interesting you brought that up about Aaron being like a master of marketing and just like I met him a few times. He's never been on the show, but he comes up on Jesse's episode and things like that. He seems like almost like an Ian MacKaye type figure in the way that he looked at what everyone was doing then and was like, this is important, and started documenting it and gathering it together, and kind of like it was, a lot of it was sold to me through a zine, or those tapes that people would pass around. You hear about like some of these like bands like you guys were in beforehand. Like it just seems like he kind of, in the same way that Ian did for DC, saw what was happening and was like, okay, this is special, which is really hard to do as a young person. Like I still struggle with, am I doing anything special?
I think his dad was a professor, and he's a really smart guy, and was at a very young age. And like, because my brother and I did a fanzine too, but our fanzine was more like a skate scene. And I remember looking back because I'm introverted and I was shy, and he's shy too, and he's awkward too. But he did 2 things that we didn't do, and looking back was like, wow, he was so advanced and I was so primitive, socially, and also in doing a venture the right way. But he focused only on the Bay Area and Bay Area bands, and he didn't give a shit whether they're big or small. It was just, were they an important band to what was going on in the city? And then he also interviewed bands like we're doing right now, like face to face. And I, was too socially awkward and unconfident. First of all, I never interviewed for my fancy in a band face to face. It was always through the mail, you know, um, and with questions, which I think is a worthless interview. Like now, sometimes people want to do an interview and they kind of send you questions, and I always have to be an asshole and go, no, because not because I'm too lazy to type, but because it's worthless. There's no exchange. It's just like it's like a pamphlet, like your zine. I'm sorry to say your zine's a stupid pamphlet or something. It's not a zine. If you're going to do that, and I've come off like an asshole, I'm sure, to a lot of different people by saying that. Well, I don't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. I just say, like, I don't do that anymore. Like, so anyway, so my point is, so no, Aaron Elliott is a one of kind kind of guy. Like, and I'm not like in contact with him. Last time I saw him was when Thorns Live played. And what year was those years of Thorns Live? That was like 2010, 9, 7, 8.
I think, yeah, before that even. No, 2009, probably 7. Yeah, you're right.
And I hadn't seen him then for years and years. I hadn't seen him or Blake for years and years. And that night, like, impressed me because Blake kind of really shined me when I tried to talk to him. It hurt my feelings. And Aaron Elliott came up to me, my brother, and gave us really big, sloppy, wet hugs. And I was like, oh, shit. And I've seen Blake since, and I've actually razzed him about that. And, who knows what was going on that he like, he basically, I saw him and I was, oh, man, I haven't seen you in like 9 years, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking and I was like, oh, I'm really excited to see you guys play. And I just noticed he was doing the looking over my shoulder and thinking, oh, do you need to go do something or talk to somebody or something? Yeah, I gotta go talk to somebody about something. And I was like, okay. And it didn't it didn't I understand, like, you got to play a show and you're just nerve-wracking and you might have to go do something and stuff. But then I go to my brother, hey, do you want a beer? And he goes, I guess so. And so I walk over to the little beer line, and then I just see Blake walking through the crowd aimlessly, just like, because there's no backstage. He didn't want to talk to me. And like, like I said, I've seen him a bunch of times since, especially I've seen him a bunch after we played with him after Jawbreaker got back together. And I mentioned that to him. He said, no, I wouldn't do that. Why would I do that? I went, what? There you go. Yeah, dude, you should do that.
I think it's interesting. I love the fact that him and Adam are in the same band. I've never really met Chris, but I find so diametrically opposed, kind of personality wise. And
it's a three-way thing. Like, Chris, if you could, that's true. Like, one guy is so gung ho and he's so like almost anal about getting it going, and he was like just like breaking his back for decades to raise the Jawbreaker flag. And then this other reluctant, the genius of the band guy going, oh, I don't want to do that. No, we don't want to do that. Yeah, that's you say diametrically opposed. But then you have Chris, who's just like a very interesting, like, strange, quirky personality kind of guy that's different than either of them. And it's just like, I think it's one of the reasons why Jawbreaker is such an amazing band. It's like they are just, and why they could make a movie about it, is they are just like nutcase. Like, they're just three people that should never been in a band together, / perfect to be in a band together for what to happen, because yeah, they're just such, like, are you done talking about this, or can I add to this? Yeah,
go please. Like, this is awesome.
If you like tangents, I'm like a perfect guest for a podcast. But I was at Fest and I was watching the Menzingers, and I was sitting next to my friend. I probably should say who it was, but a guy in a band. And I was like, we were in the side stage at the Bo Diddley Plaza, the big place at Fest, and Menzingers were playing. And the guy leads over to me and he goes, this is an enjoyable band. I was like, yeah, this is probably the biggest band of the weekend. Like, they're huge at Fest. or whatever. And he goes, oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Uh-huh. And and he goes, reads over back to me again, and he goes, this is fucking boring. And they're milk toast, right? And I was like, what? Like, because like personally, I think Messengers are like currently one of the best bands. And I go, what? What? And he goes, no, 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 don't get me wrong. They're really good. I'm sure these songs I'm listening to, I just don't know them. And I'm sure they're really well crafted and stuff. But look at those guys. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, like Samiam, like you're a bunch of fucking freaks. You're like weirdos. And I've always loved Samiam because you look like a bunch of just weirdos that would never be in a band that are in a band and would never be in a band together. And he goes, look at my band. Like we're fucking freaks. Like one guy's an asshole, one guy's sweet as shit, one guy looks homeless, one guy drives a Mercedes. We fight all the time, and it's a mess. And I go, yeah, Semi fights a lot, and it has a mess too. He goes, yeah, that's what's so good about this band. I'll bet you. He goes, I'll bet you this band all went to each one of their weddings. I bet you this band's never had a fight. I bet you they go bowling after band practice on Thursdays. They're fucking boring. And then he sort of, the last thing he said, like walked back on what he said of saying, I'll bet you they're a good bag. He goes, this band fucking sucks.
Oh my
God. And I was like, all right. Well, maybe they don't got the magic of big freaks like Jawbreaker or whatever, but I think they got a lot of magic because, you know, they didn't play last at Fest. This is last year or the year before. Like Hot Water played after him, Anti-Flag played after him, Bad and Souls played after him. But Messengers was the biggest band of the weekend, for sure.
Oh yeah. And especially like you're saying this at Fest too, right? Like that for them is like that's like their stage. Yeah. I've never been to Fest. We always used to do our own little hardcore fest in Toronto. So I don't know if
I thought you would have played Fest for sure.
No, we've supposed we're I think we're playing this year for the first time, but we would always do our album releases on Halloween weekend.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And with kids, I'm like, yeah. So just always never really worked out, but it's interesting how bands have scenes, and I think that like obviously Jawbreaker was huge, but they're kind of like weirdly a band without a scene, like a band without a country. Like they're an LA band, they moved to New York, and then they wind up kind of in the Berkeley thing, but they're not really. Yeah, like it's not really their play scene. And then talking to them and finding out like, oh, like, well, I had no idea Adam's sister's Kembra Fowler. So that blew my fucking mind. And then they started doing like Sonic Youth inspired noise jams for like improv for her. And it was like, oh, it just kind of made sense why it never really sounded like any place that they were from, because they were kind of like pulling from different places. Like it never could fit in the same way. I think Sam I Am never really fit into a sound.
Yeah, no, I think we'll probably talk about that about Samiam, but it's the strength of any kind of band and the weakness of any kind of band. I think being on an island, like I shouldn't talk about Jawbreaker so much or for Jawbreaker, but for Samiam, and I say this kind of like I repeat myself in interviews, I guess, because I really feel this is true, that at the time in the 90s when Samiam was sort of a little bit more serious about like trying, being not being quite punk, not being quite indie rock, not being like alternative or rock, not being any of those things, but being a little bit of it, I think hurt us. Because I think for the short term, I think like, because you compare to Samiam to like other bands like that were on Epitaph and Fat, where I'm not saying these bands contemporaries on those labels were playing any kind of game, but they played the game of being popular a lot better than Samiam because, well, fuck it. I would say I'm not going to name names, but I'm just going to name names because it's much easier. But like a band like Lagwagon or No Extra Name or whatever, or Pulley, or not, whatever the band before Pulley was.
10-Foot Pole.
They all like, they went to Fat, they went to Epitaph because they really sounded like what they were, right? And like I remember, like I didn't really know what No Use for Name sounded like, for instance, right? And then someone told me No Use for Name are blowing up right now, and they have a song that's on Live 105, which was like the alternative station in the Bay Area. And I was like, what? No, like Gilman, know your name? No. You're gonna go, yeah, they're on the radio like 5 times a day and everything. I was like, oh my God. The second they played, like, but before he hit the chorus, I was just listening live on 105 and I go, holy shit, this is a No Use for Name, right? And sure enough, it was No Use for Name. It was a song called Soulmate that had a brief, like, shiny little, at least in the Bay Area, I don't know about in Toronto or anything, but did really well. And I remember when I heard that too, and I knew, and the first time I heard Pennywise, I was like, I bet you, Rise Against too. Someone told me, oh, like 2003, 2004, someone said, that, you know that band Fat that were on Fat called Rise Against? They're blowing up and they're on the radio. And I lived down here in LA by then, and I was listening to the counterpart of Live 105, which is called K-Rock. And their song came on, and I go, holy shit, that must be Rise Against. I did go, that must be. I go, holy shit, I'm listening to Rise Against. Never heard him before. And I knew it was because they were exactly what they were supposed to be, so to speak. Like they sounded a little bit like, Offspring, a little bit like NoFX, a little bit like whatever, Bad Religion or whatever. And it was like, it came through. And then you got Samiam, or like we were talking before, Jawbreaker. And it's like, hey, do you ever see a picture of that band, Samiam? Or you ever like, you're getting your old sister, your older sister have a Jawbreaker CD or something like that? Yeah. What do they sound like? And you go, oh, I'll play it for you. And they play it, and you go, oh, that's not what I thought it would sound like at all. This is totally different than what I thought. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And so in the short term, like in the 90s, I think that really hurt. I think it hurt Jawbreaker too before they had their little moment in the 90s, which is way smaller than their moment in the 2020s. Because those bands got way bigger, like a Pennywise, or like way bigger, or Lagwagon. And Lagwagon and Pennywise are still like super big, maybe even bigger now, like a couple of decades later. But all the other bands, there was a lot of bands. There was like 40 bands that did really well. Like I don't really mean play a game, but played that game, sort of like sound like what they're supposed to and what was of the moment, and it was very specific, and they didn't stray away from that sound. And like Sam, we just didn't adhere to any sound at all, really. We just okay, here's my point. I've been rambling. Sorry about that. I have a tendency to do that. But at the time, I think that really hurt us. But now, 20 something years ago, the only reason that Samiam's still relevant at all is because we're like kind of looked at as being a little bit original or having our own thing, and we stayed true to having our own thing. And the few people that do love Samiam really love Samiam because there's something unique about us, and there's something like, I don't know, kind of real. And going back to what my friend said about the Messengers, that we're a bunch of fucking freaks, that you're like, who the fuck are these guys? What are they doing on stage right now? They don't look like rockers or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think with Sam I Am, it's also sort of the same thing with Soup. It's like as a kid that was buying records back then, so much of it was, okay, I only have a limited amount of resources. I can trust this brand, be it the Lookout brand or the Fat Records brand, or there was a sound associated with it, with these labels. New Red Archives was always like a weird crapshoot, like what it was going to turn out like when you bought the record.
Yeah.
I like some of my favorite records in retrospect are like the Swingin' Utters record, your record. Like, there's like a lot of great shit on that label.
There was no New Red Archive sound to speak of.
Yeah. And
years later, we were on this label, Hopeless, and Hopeless has maybe now they do have a really shitty sound, which, or far be it to me to judge, but like what I consider to be a soulless kind of sound of garbage and commercial bullshit, right? But Samiam just kept on hopping to things that didn't have any identity too, label wise. Like Atlantic, there's no Atlantic sound. Then Ignition, there was no Ignition sound, and New Red Archives, there's nothing, Now we have a record. We put out a record last year, this year, last year, whenever, last year, and it's on a label that has like has a sound, kind of a sound, like, but it's having a moment. Like the only time we've ever been on a label that was kind of a cool label for people of the moment. It's called Pure Noise or whatever. We don't really fit into that either, because we're old farts and we don't play hardcore or pop punk really.
It's interesting with Hopeless too. Like you're saying, the sound now is not something I'm necessarily into, but there is this like, there was kind of a Hopeless thing in the sense that it was like all really real bands at it, like D4.
It was when we signed, and then the second we signed, my friend Aaron left.
Well, I think that's like there's definitely some really offensive things that musicians have said about labels over the years that I probably shouldn't quote now directly, but like the label is like such a sticky thing, right? Because that's where you try and like you're trying to do this alchemy to turn art into money, and it's not ever a great process. Like we are definitely.
I think Epitaph actually is like strikes a balance,
I wound up on Epitaph without ever signing because they bought J Tree, and all of a sudden I got a letter one day like, "Hey, welcome to Epitaph," and they're great. They pay us and everything like that, but it was like, oh shit, like, oh wow, I guess I got traded with by J Tree.
And that's not a good feeling, but I don't know.
Like these labels have to exist. Like I definitely do not have the wherewithal to put out records myself. So, and I do labels. What they're doing sucks because you have to deal with crazy people like us, and you have to like try and like manage their expectations. But there is always the potential for this stuff to go shitty. I guess on both sides, but I've only experienced it from the band's point of view.
I've already been ripped off, and so I don't talk shit about too many labels, but I'll talk shit about the ones that I feel have ripped us off.
Yeah, like I definitely feel the same. And I don't think no, J Tree ripped us off. Like we had to pay $20,000 to get over a contract, and then they ended up selling our record to Epitaph in the end. So yeah, like that. There's like weird blood on every label once you're not on the label. Like I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I'm in.
I don't feel that about every label. I just feel about two.
Yeah,
like two labels we've been on a lot of labels. I don't feel that way about the multinational corporation that like gave us the boot. I don't have bad blood like about that. But either the multinational corporations like Atlantic or Ignition, which was Warner Brothers label. I felt like they were upfront about things.
I've heard that for all the shit talk that you hear about major labels, and I think it's antiquated now because we're all just on Spotify and we're all listening on iPhones, so it's not like really the conversation anymore. But most of the people, especially on Atlantic, like the Melvins, even Matador was part of Atlantic for a brief moment there. Like Atlantic made some cool moves.
When you were on Matador, was it in a major label?
No, we were part of Beggars. They had already bought themselves back and then become part of the Beggars group, and at this point, Beggars is bigger than some major labels because of Adele and because of a lot of artists, not fucked up, but a lot of other artists. So it is, yeah, it's interesting. We are rushing way the fuck ahead because I got like pages of notes from before, and I haven't even asked you the titular question of this podcast. How'd you get a punk?
So my brother and I have a twin brother, Sasha. That's I'll probably bring him up 1,000 times. We both we went from liking the music of our parents because when we were really young and not knowing any better, and not knowing how to discover music on our own, and not really knowing how to evaluate music. It's like they loved, like, my mom loves from Argentina, so she brought up like she would like crank like Brazilian music and stuff. And so like, oh, I guess I like that. But my parents also like funk, you know, 80s funk and stuff. And so we were really into that. And then the first music that like was actually ours that we chose was like thrash, like metal that that was happening kind of around us in the Bay Area, although we were really young. So like we weren't like really part of that scene as much. We went to shows, but we were like the little squirts bopping around in the corner going, ah! Or like doing a stage job and not be able to get to the floor because we're too skinny and light to actually get between people. I totally vividly remember trying to swim down. I'm okay, I'm done now. I got to get down, but I couldn't because the men, you know, carrying us, right? Um, and then punk is this thing that, like, it's very vivid, the show and the moment that I still love early thrash, but I'm not a giant metalhead or anything, but I love like the first Exodus record and Metallica and Slayer. Um, but I went to a show, it was at the Farm, which was like sort of like a collective in San Francisco. And it was just like a kind of like one of these amazing shows, if you look back, but it was Marginal Man, who I loved for years after that, Scream, um, Subhumans, but it was Your Subhumans, the
Oh
Canadian.
my God, the better Subhumans.
And yes, and for me,
Me too.
and the Dead Kennedys. And although I was really super into Marginal Man, but not as much as I would end up being, and Subhumans, it was like there was just a giant. It was sort of like a bunch of good bands, and then the headliner when the Dead Kennedys came on because Dead Kennedys was like, at least from my perception, was less of a band playing and more like, you know, it was theatrical, it was political, it was like there was just a certain kind of like air in this big room. I don't know, it was about 800 people or more maybe or maybe less, and it felt like that. But suddenly something just happened where it like I don't even know how to describe it. Like I don't want to describe it and say like it was transcendental, man, because I don't want to sound like a dumb hippie or anything. Um, but it was just larger than life, right? And I'm guessing you never saw him because you're too young. Uh, but it was like, yeah, I mean, it was. I remember just like I kind of figuratively shat my pants while they were playing, right? Like if you can imagine, like when you first heard Police Truck in your room, and you were like, holy shit! Like at the end of that song, you were like, holy shit! Uh, what was that? Like what I just experienced, like the ebb and flow of that song, and just like just the concept of talking about going to jail, and just like, what the fuck? Um, Imagine being just like a young kid in the middle of like a swirling pit and everything, and just like experiencing it live for the first time, not hearing it on record and stuff. I was just like, what just happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, was verbal abuse kind of playing crossover stuff at that point? Like, were they playing the thrash scene?
They didn't play in the thrash scene. They played in the punk scene, even though it was kind of thrash music. But like they went into that double bass and like thrash metal, but they weren't in that scene. Like you wouldn't see Verbal Abuse opening up for like when Metallica came to town, or even when they lived here, they wouldn't be playing with Metallica or Exodus or anything, or Blind Illusion or any of the millions of other bands that aren't remembered from that scene. But they were like they still stayed, even though they played that style of music. They they stayed, and just like the way Suicidal Tendencies, until they got bigger as a metal band, they still played only punk shit when the second record and stuff until they got bigger, right? And and you know, Verbal Abuse didn't get bigger, so they just stayed in like the punk world, you know, like the On Broadway and Ruthie's and stuff. They didn't go on to like wherever, like they didn't play Metal Mondays. They didn't play straight up metal shows, really.
I only ask because I think it's like you're saying, the Dead Kennedys it's impossible to really understand post the Dead Kennedys what that meant to not just American underground music, but international underground music. They are like and it's only through reading about it and sort of watching old videos that you can kind of appreciate that them, and I guess to a lesser extent Circle Jerks, were like these were national bands uh, on another level. Like different kids would come out to see their shows, from what people have told me, when they would show up in town. So to see them there and then would have been mind blowing. And now we go to shows. You go to a Slayer show. You go to not Dead Kennedy's show, but like you go to a hardcore show. There's sort of the same reaction from the audience. But I imagine at that point, it's moshing hadn't infected metal yet, so it would have been a completely different vibe crowd wise.
It was a totally different crowd, and that's what I was going to say. Is after that one show, I still loved Metallica. I still lost interest after the first record with Exodus, but Exodus is a band I saw a million times, and even right now, I'm thinking like I want to go put on Bonded by Blood. Like it's like my favorite shit. Because I haven't listened to it in a long time, and I just thought about Exodus, and I was like, "Fuck, I love Bonded by Blood." Such a great record. But after like that show, like going back to like the club where my brother and I used to see metal, was either Ruthie's or it's the Keystone Berkeley, and like I could just remember participating in that kind of like weird, stupid metal audience maneuvering, like going to the front row and going you know, and just like and metal just seemed very stupid to me after that, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are really, who, if they're still listening or listening, it's like, what an asshole! Like metal is like most important thing in my life. Metal is really smart, and it's a maybe it is now, you know, more smart, and there's a lot of different kind of subgenres of metal that are super smart and stuff. But at the time, like I went to a lot of shows, metal shows before I went punk, and I saw Bon Jovi in a club, right? I didn't go in. I was outside trying to get in to see Motley Crue at the Keystone Berkeley, but it sold out, so I just out. And it's just like, it was the kind of music where like, God, how do I say this? Because I sound so classist when I say this, but I just felt like a kind of a lower class of person went to metal than went to punk. Because in punk, I'm not saying it was like brain surgeons and physicists were going to punk shows, but I felt like, you know, there was some sort of like baseline intelligence that was like hopped over, you know, to be in the audience. And then I mean, there's a lot of stupidity in punk. I mean, I don't know. For me, though, I just didn't. That happened, and then I was sort of like, I'm into punk now. I still love like thrash, but like Iron Maiden seemed particularly stupid to me after that. You know, like if you looked at the lyric sheet of that, or like, and the pompous and the posturing, and then the guitar solo over here and the guitar solo over there and stuff. That's one thing about punk that it made me realize how stupid guitar solos are. You know, I mean, I still love a good guitar solo or whatever, but that kind of weird, or drum solo even worse, that weird, like really conventional kind of thing of guitar solo, or like next 20 minutes is going to be a drum solo and the whole audience is going to be bored shitless and they're going to really pretend like they're into it, but they're fucking bored, you know? And it's just this weird thing that goes on with music audiences of all kinds of different kinds of music. I just started like, I don't know, I'm rambling, but I became interested in pop. And, you know, in a couple of years later, I went to a Sonic Youth show, and Sonic Youth I had a just awakening, and it kind of made punk and hardcore seem a little stupid to me, actually, to be honest. And I love punk and I love hardcore. I still love thrash like stuff, but I never really recovered for punk after seeing Sonic Youth, to be honest. I suddenly, I was way more of an indie rock kind of guy, and I was way more into like a little bit headier kind of like getting like a headier kind of, or, and heady is a weird word, something more out of the music that was more a little bit more for me an emotional reaction than the anger of punk and hardcore, right? I know I'm boiling down whole genre down to one emotion, but like yeah, like after the Sonic Youth show, I was like, holy fuck, like there's so much like out there that I didn't realize when it comes to what music is, you know? And I still like I would still say like, do you want to meet Thurston Moore? Or do you want to meet Eddie Van Halen? And it's like, I fucking totally get Eddie Van Halen. I get it. But I want to meet like I would like to get in Thurston Moore's head, like not Eddie Van Halen's head or Kerry King's head. I fucking love Slayer, but like, sorry, like Thurston Moore to me is like such an interesting uh thing or person or just like he's on this wavelength that I'm just like, wow. Whereas like I just love Slayer. I'm not like Kerry King, like wow about Kerry King. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, I think there's like, I think the thing about punk is, and it's also painfully so at times, but it is like the most self-aware music genre, and there's like this sort of, because it is postmodern in whatever definition you're going to apply of that. Like I'm not an art school major, so I definitely probably miss applying it, but it is like you look, it's a lot of music journalists. Like it came out of kids writing fanzines, like from the very beginning, the Gizmos and Gulcher, or the stuff that was going on in Cleveland, or the stuff that was Bomp, right? Like it's a fanzine music critic way of looking at music. So you have the Clash pulling in reggae, or like because Don Letts was playing reggae records and they were hearing that stuff. So they're like, yeah, we'll put this in the stew. Or you got the Screamers bringing synth and making this punk. And there's just sort of this thing about it that's awesome, because it's all people that know better than to be doing this thing, because it is ridiculous getting up there and getting on stage and acting a fool and people watching it. But punk knows that and embraces that and plays with that even at the worst of times. Whereas other genres, particularly metal, and it's gotten, like you're saying, it's gotten better. And I think the crossover is complete now. So it's definitely not the same thing that you were experiencing back then, like you're saying. But there's not that sort of like self-awareness. Like in the same way, like Slayer has horribly offensive lyrics, and so do the fuck ups. But I still think the fuck ups know why it's wrong and are playing with it more than Slayer knows why it's wrong and are playing with
Yeah.
it. Like there's more intellectually involved, I think, weirdly, with the fuck ups. I can't believe saying
I
that,
mean,
but
Slayer is a weird one too, because the fact that he's a Catholic guy, and especially the end of Slayer before this reunion, where it seems like maybe he's energized. Who knows why they're getting back together? They'll never give a straight answer, you know, and they'll never say it's for the money, man. Um,
we all know, like we're in bands. Like there's no, anytime you see a band get back together that hate each other like that really like don't
like
want to be.
Harry King and Tom Araya hate each other. I don't really know about that.
Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that, but like, I like Lombardo got cut out, right? Like, there's that whole thing. Like, he's not in the picture, and like, there's I don't know the inner workings of Slayer at all. I think I actively avoid finding out about a lot of these other worlds other than punk. I live in my ignorant bubble, but there's like anytime a band gets back together in a way, uh, like that they're gonna make money. Of course, money's a factor.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, but what I was getting at was this. We were just talking about this awareness that exists more in punk than metal, and now, as you said, like it's more a thing in metal now, and like an enlightened metal is a thing sort of now, or like intelligent metal is a thing now. Um, I love Slayer and stuff, but I do think it's just very weird that like a really Catholic guy writes or plays in a band that has that imagery and all that stuff. And I'm not Catholic. I'm not, and I'm not religious at all. I'm a fan of being like true to yourself. And like if you were true to yourself, whenever it was, like when he got married or had his firstborn, or whenever or maybe he was always Catholic the whole time. Whenever you you just wouldn't do that. Why would you be in fucking Slayer and sing those lyrics? And uh And you know, it's oh, it's art, and it's like, why would you do that kind of art, right? Like that's like me. I'm Jewish or whatever, culturally Jewish. Would uh would I start singing Nazi lyrics? And it's just art, man. It's just
But
it's weird.
and I think that is a thing in punk too, is playing things you shouldn't play with. And I think there's definitely bands in San Francisco that are like notorious for pushing those boundaries and pushing those lines. But yeah, there's like
Superficially, like maybe with like what you wore or something, but it wasn't like, I mean, I guess there were Nazi punk bands or whatever, but you, you didn't have your whole identity like we're a Nazi band and it was just to play.
yeah.
Hey, Nazi band.
Well, I think that like there's also that like people have come on and said the foul record scene where like some of those people were like pretty severe. And I know it's like there's a big scene. There's a bunch of bands in foul records, but
What is that? Is that like a skinhead label or something?
no, that's the label that put out the fuck ups, the verbal abuse LP, and oh my
Like
gosh,
after boner, you mean?
pardon me,
After boner?
pre They're like yeah, like they. I think it's the fuck ups have come up a lot, and I'm blanking on the singer's name now, but he's someone that is people have brought up in like yeah, those guys were a little intense, and there's that.
From Texas? Is foul like a Texas thing before they moved to San Francisco?
No, I think it's San Francisco, right? Like that fuck up started in San Francisco. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I thought
And
they were also from Texas.
I thought they were from there.
You know
No.
better than I would. Yeah.
Well, now I got to double check. Now this is going to send me down another rabbit hole tonight of finding out about this stuff. And but there was also that band Puke, Spit, and Guts that chased the Teen Idols out of San Francisco famously when they were on their tour way back when.
Yeah, this is, I don't know this. I don't know
They,
that.
they were apparently like huge.
Where is this?
They would have been 80, I think. And it's like, you know, that I guess it's story they talk about in American hardcore where like Ian and the Teen Idols and Henry Rollins get on a bus to do a tour out west. And I think they went to a Circle Jerk show and they saw West Coast hardcore and they brought that back to DC. And that of course spreads on the East Coast. But they also played, I guess, one show in San Francisco with this band, Puke, Spit, and Guts. I think that's the name. And they blew up an amp, their amp, and they got chased out of the venue and I guess out of San Francisco by this band and back to DC. So there were like, well, it's a heavy town too. There's like a lot of like hard bike dudes there. There's like as much as it's a hippie town and progressive.
Oh, the San Francisco punk scene was really scary. It was super scary. Like I'm from the suburbs, Berkeley, and across the bay, like there was these squats in the old Miller brewery that was there. It was called the Vats, and that's what verbal abuse and like MDC and DRI and all those things. I was a young nerdy kid when that was going on, and I never ventured over there. And I would be honest, was just scared of going to any of those kind of shows. But there was this like huge skinhead shit going on there. It was very like Bay Area. I mean, it was what area was in punk, but it was like from my perspective as like a suburban younger kid, it was like uh murderers and drug addicts. It was very scary, and I'm sure Toronto had that share of that too. I've never seen that, but I went to shows where I was really scared of like I had to take the bus home, and I was like, holy shit, I might get killed by the skinheads and stuff. And other people, like, you know, if you were like a black kid going to a show, you might be even more scared or whatever, you know, or a gay kid.
Yeah, like it feels like the Gilman, from what I've read and what I've been told, was kind of like a completely different vibe than what was
Had
happening.
nothing to do, like the fact that they both existed in the Bay Area, they were like so separate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then when, you know, and when the San Francisco, as far as punk and hardcore, San Francisco started to die when Gilman and the Bay Area thing got up. Sometimes some of those bands were like, well, sure, we want to play Gilman. Like Verbal Abuse would play Gilman and stuff. And it didn't really play well there. It didn't really work. And if if a Gilman band wanted to play like some kind of San Francisco kind of thing, it definitely didn't work. We were this like even when some of these bands were getting bigger, like Op Ivy. Well, Op Ivy didn't really try to play in San Francisco, but I remember like Green Day, they were getting bigger, and they were like a thing in the Bay Area. And then I'd go see them play at like a club in San Francisco, and there would be 10 people, even though they were already doing like 200 to 400 people at East Bay kind of things. Like it's just two different worlds, you know. The
Mhm.
grown-ups were in San Francisco, and the little wimpy kiddies were in the East Bay.
I guess like Tim Yohannan and Jeff Bale are like the adult bridge between the two, or are they?
There were a bunch of guys. They were like Tim was like the kind of like the ringleader, I feel like, and the guy. But there were a lot of people in early Gilman that were that guided all the young nerds, you know,
Do
and
you
set
remember what? Oh,
up. Like if you think about it, like opening up a club in Berkeley, that was nonprofit. I was like, I think because I thought of them as being super old, like when Gilman started, like all these old guys, and I was also very wary of all of them because I was like, my predator alert like flag came up, like what are these old guys doing here? But I think back, and they must have only been like 35 or something like that. But I was like, what are these fucking old guys doing? And there was like, like 5 or 6 of them. And Tim was one of them. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything or anything. I'm just like, I was just like, ah.
it is interesting because like, and now it's changed. I think everything can be monetized, but back then there were like almost this altruistic, and as much as there are actual creeps that exist in these scenes and preyed on people, there was this sort of like benevolent,
Yeah.
like older person type thing too.
Yeah, it's weird. There was. And like Gilman, like, it's amazing. I like thinking of Gilman happening. I don't live in Berkeley anymore and I haven't for 20 years, but thinking of like a thing like Gilman happening in LA, where I live, it's like, God, who would do that? And like the insurance, just the insurance, you could get so screwed opening up a club, in a million ways. Like some drunk kid gets run over in front, and then the parents come after you or whatever. There's 1,000 things. Like altruism, like it's all. I mean, it had that altruistic quality, but like altruism, I don't know if that's the word I would use. Like I mean,
Yeah,
music saves people's like in lives too, but might be a little bit of an overstatement to say like Timmy Henry was like this altruistic figure and but yeah, definitely like he didn't do it for the money, and money was not a concern of his, and he just devoted so much of his resources and attention to make that happen. And now it's like 30 years later and it still exists. It's incredible.
well, it like maybe altruistic is overstating it, but like that model of the Gilman was attempted afterwards. Like that became like a proof of concept for spaces all over the world. And obviously, Gilman's still here, and a lot of these spaces are no longer here.
I feel
But
like the thing about what you're about to say or what you said is like that's what I thought. Like Samiam's first European tour was in 1990, and then even before Samiam, several small bands, punk bands toured, like Youth Brigade and stuff, um, and Victim's Family and No Means No and stuff, and there was when we went in 1990, like it was a real eye opener because we thought like first of all we thought the world looked towards Gilman and Gilman was like the center of everything, and then we went on tour in Europe and we went for 2 months, so we played 45 places that every one of those, not everyone, but almost every one of those places had on their own this kind of mentality of community and punk. Most of them were squat, so it was more than just punk. It was more like like anarchist people and just a variety like the genesis of some of those places were outside of just music and venue. And I realized like wow, like because people would ask about Gilman because of Maximum Rock and Roll, right? This is what I think. I think that Maximum Rock and Roll made it seem, even to us at Gilman, like Gilman was the first and Gilman was the best and Gilman was the original. I went on tour from there and realized, holy shit, this exists independently, completely independently of Gilman, all over the place. And I didn't know that, you know.
I think though, I know you're 100% right. Like the European squat system or the youth center system too of venues
Places that
there.
ran in the 70s and
Yeah,
stuff.
but I think there is a difference because, like you're saying, those were part of larger political movements, and a lot of times they were sometimes the illegal clubs. With the youth centers, they were sponsored by the government. I think the thing that made Gilman unique to me, and I maybe seen differently, but like, is that it was a church built to punk, and there are politics involved, but the politics are almost secondary to this adherence to like four letters, and especially with Tim and Max Rock and Roll, basically the next editors that followed in his footsteps had to take a vow of poverty because you were not allowed to ever draw a cent from working at that magazine, and it was such a slog that you kind of had to get just like part-time jobs basically to pay rent. Like it was like being a non creepy priest or something. Like you were like it giving your life over to this thing. And it's what is this thing? Right? Like it's at one time it's San Francisco and one time it's the Gilman and it's LA's version of this thing. It's Fat Record. Like it's all this shit, but like Gilman was like built to it in a way.
I can see that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Um, were you familiar with the Romper Room Rejects at all?
By name, yeah. Who are they?
That's my friend Nate Wilson, who now plays in played in Devoid of Faith. He's got a new band, The Fright. But he was like they were like kind of a thrash band. I got their demo right here actually. But they were like a thrash band, kind of like '87, I guess, in San Francisco, or like Berkeley, San Francisco. So it does feel like just prior to everything that's going on. But I think he said they played the Gilman once or
Yeah,
twice or something.
I remember that my name from Gilman days. Yeah.
Yeah, like it feels like there was like a real interesting kind of pre-Gilman scene that kind of also seems to be happening a little bit too.
I feel like, well, the thing is, you mean a pre-Gilman thing that was separate from what we were talking about from San Francisco?
Yeah, like more like your guys' generation.
That was what I was getting at about Crimpshrine and Soup and Isocracy, where there was this pre-Gilman thing in my little like bubble of friends where it was sort of happening, and then Gilman happened soon after, and it was just like so timing wise, so perfect for us to be involved in Gilman. And and like same thing with Isocracy. I think Isocracy was a band from 15 or 18 miles out in the boonies, and they probably wouldn't have happened. And Green Day wouldn't have happened because they were from there too. They wouldn't have happened if Gilman didn't happen. Not because they didn't have the talent to or whatever, but it would be like they would just play some parties, would have just played at some parties in Benicia and Pinole and El Saab or whatever, and then didn't go anywhere. And then we wouldn't have American Idiot.
For me as a kid, reading Max Rock and Roll, like you're saying, that was a great advertising campaign for the Gilman, but that was making it. Getting to that stage.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny to me, like from my perspective too, it's like I was so enthralled. Like the main thing for Max Rock and Roll for me was scene reports, and I would be so enthralled. And I always wondered who these people were. Like some guy in Poland decided to write this month scene report from frickin', some from Warsaw or whatever, or Ljubljana, scene report from Ljubljana. And to me, it would just sound like or like Caracas or whatever. It would seem so like otherworldly, right? And just like so amazing. And I think a lot of people were very envious of Gilman. It was funny because I was really envious of people from other scenes because I was like surely all the politics and the shit talking and the whatever that goes on with my group of friends doesn't happen there because that's fucking Sao Paulo, where and then later in life when I did actually go to places, I go, no, it's the same everywhere. People suck, and no scene's perfect, no band's perfect, and no nothing's. There's no such thing as perfect.
Well, and I think that's the other thing that Max Rock and Roll did that you bring up there is make it global. Like, and obviously people tape trading and this stuff exists prior to this, but like it was a global conversation about punk, obviously American centered, but
Yeah.
like I got a friend, Aryan, who sings in this massive hardcore band, like huge band in Indonesia, Seringai. And he got a copy of Maximum Rock and Roll as a kid when it was impossible to find this kind of music for him, and started writing to bands, started writing scene reports for MRR, and that was really like the birth of their local scene that now is like a giant music scene. Like it's almost like a handbook, and Book Your Own Fucking Life was literally a handbook for people.
Yeah, that more than anything, I think, created like smaller bands around the world. What ended up happening now, like now it's very strange. Like I just did a tour in Europe, right? And I have this weird perspective of doing it like 30, like once or twice a year for 30 years, and just seeing it go from like showing up at a squat in Italy and they go, who are you? What? Like, well, we're gonna have a party night. You guys can like sleep here, but there's no show, right? Because it was so unorganized, to now like everything is so freaking professional. And it's just like it's just crazy how different like the experience of touring is now. But it all started with like there was like if you're a little punk band, like there's a couple of like scenesters that were booking agents or whatever, but like it came from nothing, kind of the international punk circuit, and that those editions of Book Your Life or whatever it was called, um, really had a big part of creating it, right? That's like crazy. And then the internet made it leapfrog, I guess, later on, but before the internet, it was like those little machines that you put in payphones that made the sound of a dime drop so that you get free phone calls. Remember those? Or
Phone
maybe
dialers, yeah, like the auto dialer or whatever it was called. Yeah, like
yeah, and
someone always had a hookup.
you could book a tour by using that and looking through book your life. What was it? What was it called? It's book your fucking life. What
Book
was
Your
it?
Own Fucking Life. Yeah.
Right. And that was just a new thing, right? And thanks to Max Rock and Roll, that was a thing, and it wouldn't have been a thing without it. So
Yeah, and that's like, what, at the risk of overstating it again, like I think that's the thing that punk did that really changed the world was build this like underground network, but it was kind of underground in the sense that it didn't need any sort of involvement other than the people participating in it around the world that still exists to this day. And it's almost like the Gilman, it's passed down to subsequent generations of people, and it outlives in hopes like all the bands, like it outlives everything. Like this culture will be the thing that hopefully keeps giving kids permission to make stuff and to make art and to, like you're saying, like this is the reason there's Green Day in this world. Like for better or for worse, thank American Idiot. Thank this thing for American Idiot. Thank this thing for Fucked Up. Thank this thing for every kind of record that kind of came out afterwards.
yeah, no, like when I, just a couple weeks ago, when I was in Europe and I like had a really nice time, we could tour, and I was looking out there and I was like, God, it's so different playing this big ass club with this sound system and everything's clean, clean as shit, and or whatever. And it's like, God, I think of playing this city, in 1991 or 1990 or whatever, and I was like I loved it, but like I played in a shithole, and there's literally a dog peeing on my amp. Like a dog walked by peeing. It wasn't my amp. It was James, the other guitar player. We played in Vienna, and it was like 10 people and like really punk people, and like Samiam. They were like, "What is this?" And it was not a good show. And a dog literally came up, sniffed James's leg, and then peed on his cabinet, and we were just like, "Wow, this is real Austrian punk."
Yeah, I think there's like there's almost that first thing that kind of happens in the early mid 80s, like post DOA Black Flag and sort of the idea of this DIY network. And then there's almost like another great leap forward that happens post Nirvana, but more I guess post Green Day, Offspring, Rancid kind
Yeah.
of era.
People always talk about Nirvana, and Nirvana was like a huge cultural shift. But when it comes to actual punk rock, it was Green Day and Offspring.
I've always said the exact same thing. Like I think mainstream music needed
Yeah.
Nirvana, but like you're saying, like I didn't, and like I think Green Day and Offspring definitely, but I like Faith No More, like the importance they seem to have, like with Mortem Distribution coming out in their wake and kind of pre Nirvana bringing alternative culture to kind of people uh like I think Larry Livermore, when he was on the show, we were talking about it, and he's like, our Nirvana was Faith No More because that helped our scene. Like we were already kind of going. Like Operation Ivy comes out the same time as Nirvana.
Before.
Before, you're right, before. Sorry, but like the LP, and yes, it's before Nirvana. Like there's like this whole thing that's happening already in the Bay Area that's going to become the next big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was in the middle of it, like the Green Day thing, not so much the Offspring thing, but the Green Day thing. And I feel like fortunate, even though I wasn't involved and like or it like didn't help me. I feel fortunate to like live an experience where I was just around to see it with some of my peers, you know, like I was like that was like I remember I went when they played the Oakland Coliseum, right, which was just like the hugest thing ever. Like I was like, holy moly. And I was like, I don't get me wrong, like Samiam, because of Samiam, I had like a healthy dose, like I'm jealous, and I, you know, I had to wrestle with jealousy and stuff. I'm not some kind of like saint guy, but also at the same time, I just had this like uh, happy for them and pride also, and I don't know, like it's you see like in old movies or YouTube, you see clips of like some like lady and she's an old lady and she's talking about going to the Cavern Club and seeing the Beatles and stuff. And I remember being kind of like, wow, wouldn't that be neat if you actually freaking went through that and stuff? And really like, you know, like Green Day doesn't have the cultural like reach that the Beatles did, but like I had my own little like experience of like brushing alongside that kind of like cultural shift, and like I feel like I feel like a certain amount of pride of being around Green Day before, during, and after a little bit, and seeing what it's like, you know, which Sam I was never going to show me any of that on its own, right? It's kind of neat.
Well, let's not get it twisted. Sweet Baby walked so Green Day could run. You were the first band signed to a Warner Brothers subsidiary with Ruby Records, which I think is this. We're talking about a storied label. They brought Ruby Records back for
Yeah,
you guys.
the guy did Bob somebody, I forget what his name was.
Bob Biggs.
Bob Biggs, yeah, Bob Biggs. Bob Biggs and his wife came to Gilman, and his wife got really drunk. And then you can't tell now, but then I was like kind of like however old I was, like 17, 18, whatever. And I had like long hair. They were dreads actually, and it's she got drunk, and she's older than me, but she was kind of like flirting with me a little bit, like and Bob Biggs did not like that.
Was it Penelope Spheres? Were they still married at that point or no?
I mean, like I was a virgin and I was like scared of the like she could have been 21 and she was an old lady to me, like, so I don't even know if I was like mature enough to look at her face, but she was like drunk at Gilman and like hanging on me. Uh I could have been, I don't know. Like I just remember that and I remember like Dallas, the singer, going, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And I go, I'm not doing anything.
I'm a kid. Help me.
But yeah, I had zero experience with girls or women, and so yeah.
I don't blame you. It's also like I imagine because they're like a music industry thing. Like you guys are kids, and all of a sudden you're, and I know this is like the end of Slash Records, but still like it is part of that Warner family. Like they had put Los Lobos, Dream Syndicate,
Yeah,
like
it's weird.
massive.
It's weird. At the time, it seems so like, oh, they revived this olden day shit, right? But like the X records were the big thing only like 6 or 7 years before that, right?
Hmm.
But for some reason, I mean, I was young, so like, the difference. Like I said, I was probably 17 or 18, and that woman was probably like 21 or 25 or something. And I thought, oh God, old lady and stuff. In the same way, I thought like Slash, that's from the olden days. But like if I think about 6 years ago, I don't go now. I don't go 6 years ago. It's like they revived that label from 2018 or 17. Like, oh, way back then. Yeah, but to me, like I felt like, oh yeah, Ruby and Slash, that's just all dead. Like that fanzine was huge a long time ago before I was into punk, and it's been dead for a couple years. It's like that old thing. I was impressed, that the Misfits were on Ruby, and that I liked the like I'm a graphic designer, and even then I had aspirations and I had a fanzine. I was really impressed because I thought that Slash like had really good design and stuff. Um, and I was also obviously impressed because, oh, Warner Brothers or whatever. Um, but yeah, we all we did not take any of that seriously, And I told your brother actually to ask about Sweet Baby in case you guys. He said something about Sweet Baby, and I go, oh yeah, make sure you ask something about Sweet Baby because I want to tell the story. And it's that I heard, and I don't know if it's true, and I don't care if it's true. I just want it to be true, so it's true, whether it's true or not. That Ruby made 8,000 copies of the album of Sweet Baby, and then over the course of how many ever years before they went out of business, sold 1,000 or got rid of 1,000, and then they had to take 7,000 of them and put them in landfill, right? And because then, like years and years later, like Lookout redid that record, re-put it out, or whatever. And so just last week, total coincidence, some guy from on Instagram emailed me and go, look what I found. And it was a picture of the original Sweet Baby record, not the Lookout one, the Ruby one. And I was like, oh, rad. A guy I don't know, just a random guy on the Samiam, like Instagram. And I go, I was hoping that he was gonna like say, "Oh yeah, it cost me a pretty penny," and because it's like such a legendary record and everything. Um, but I go, "How much did you pay for it?" He goes, 50 Australian, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" Like if you just buy any old record, it's like new, it's probably like 45 or whatever. So it's like it's just like a record that you bought, like oh. And then I told the guy, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they burned the other 7,000. You'd think it'd be at least $75.
Well, you got to steal because the cheapest one you can get on Discogs is $100 now of that vinyl. And
Yeah, yeah, I
you're,
know. Is Australian dollar stronger or weaker than the US dollar at this point?
I don't know. I'm up in Canada, so I'm constantly just worried about our dollar compared to your dollar.
Is your
Like
dollar stronger or weaker?
weaker, weaker. It was definitely a huge problem when I had an eBay addiction. It was it was bad then. But there I think there were certainly two distinct pressings of the Sweet Baby record because there's like different names on the stampers of the two records when you look on the Run Out Grooves. But like do you know Brian Ray Turcott? Played in the Drab way back when. He did that book Fucked Up and Photocopied.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
that. I have that book actually.
yeah, he's a great guy. Like like a definitely like a punk collector beyond belief. Like so much of that stuff in that punk museum is his stuff. But he worked at Slash during that period, and was telling me stories about them just like him going to the dumpster and getting a box of Germ singles, like just the shit they were throwing away there.
Yeah, no. So they when we went down to LA and played like an empty show, Sweet Baby show, and we went into their warehouse and I took a box of ex White Girl 7 inches, which
That,
I like when I ended up selling like records around 2009 or whatever, like those were worth so much money. And I took a box. I don't know, there's 25 of them. Um, I gave away literally 20 of them and I got like five to sell. And I was like, oh my God, if I had all those. And now, well, actually, it was probably in 2000. Well, I don't know how much they're worth, but like it was original pressing uh, X singles. I was like,
yeah, like he pulled out of the dumpster like the original hand done mock ups for all the Germs artwork and the layouts and shit. Like they were just like
can you imagine if you went and tried to sell those now? Like how much money for those things?
crazy. Well, like it's weird because I think we're at a moment where this stuff's being appreciated as actual artworks.
Yeah.
So like some of that stuff is like the price of art. Like it would be like a one of a kind piece.
My friend Steve used to have a record label with Greg Hetson, and for a while he had like the lithography, um, like paste up. I don't know what it was, but it was the original shit for the back of the Wild in the Streets for Circle Jerks, which was Sean Carey's like skanking guy or whatever. And not only because I do illustrations and I do graphic design for a living, and I've always like I've thought so highly of uh, like art and print and everything about that. But just from like a Circuit Jerks fanboy, like every time I go to his house, I would just stare at it, because it had little marks and it had like little Pantone chip taped to it, and the tape was really yellow and little scribbles with the not a grease pen, but like the blue pen that doesn't show up on camera, and I was just like, yeah, like if I was Elon Musk and interested in that, I'd be like, well, what do you want for that? Like $5 million? Sure, okay, I'll give you $5 million because that's surely what it's worth, right?
Well, there's a new breed of collector too in the punk world that aren't necessarily even punks at all, and they are Elon Musk type people with just buckets of money
Yeah.
and just going through and trying to buy the biggest pieces in every genre just so you can kind of like lock it away as an investment.
There's a term for that in the guitar world, and it's called I just found out about recently on Reddit. So like vintage guitars. Vintage guitars used to be old guitars. Like in the 80s, when heavy metal guy wanted to play guitar, they wanted to have the newest technology thing with a Floyd Rhodes and whatever. And if you had like a 1955 Les Paul Jr., for instance, to go, I don't want that fucking old piece of shit. And so, I don't know when it was in the 90s or the 2000s, suddenly vintage was a thing, right? And so now that Les Paul Jr., like that was no one wanted in 1982, now it's worth like $15,000 or whatever, right? And so I'm a nerd and stuff, and I sometimes just drool over guitars and look at stuff. But I started to see that people, I don't know if it's like widely adopted, but they make a differentiation from the collector and the player. And what the the collector that buys these guitars and drives up the value, but they don't even play guitar. They put it up on the wall, right? And I've seen it a lot of times where they call that person dentist, right? As opposed to like a normal human being that plays guitar that wants guitar, a dentist, because a dentist will buy a 59 Les Paul has the money to buy it, the means to buy it, and also he buys it and then he puts it in a frame and he puts it in the lobby of his dentist's office. And I just thought, like, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, like they're dentists.
A couple months ago, Steve Aoki put online his copy of the Gorilla Biscuits Start Today LP on Purple that he had gotten graded and sealed away in that sort of plexi box. Like, people do it with comic books now and trading cards and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And that's always been kind of, I think, the fear of people that buy records to listen to them is that this is where it's going to go to, where
I mean, isn't it there? Kind of.
it is now. Like Steve Aoki posting that got a lot of punk collectors really upset because it's like the line you don't want to cross as a collector, because you always, even though I am ultimately just buying this shit to have, it doesn't really serve the functional purpose it was originally intended to have. I still dilute myself and being like, no, 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 but this is the way I need to have it because it serves the function of sounding better to me. But yeah, like I think we're all just delaying the inevitable of us sealing all these records away, and they're all getting graded and no one's listening to them. It's just a pure commodity for people.
I mean, I don't know if it's true, but I've been told that like a very low percentage of records that are manufactured and sold today are ever played.
Oh, I'm sure, right? Like I like, and but that's why I bought records in the beginning. Like I remember getting those early Lookout singles, and I bought the Operation Ivy first 7-inch used at a record store, and I noticed there was like a red stamp, and I'm like, what the hell is this red stamp? And then finding out, oh, all the early Lookout records, like the first presses had a like a hand stamped number on them, and so I
Yeah,
was trying to always get those because it felt like my way of touching the past in the same way
yeah,
that I guess like
yeah.
an artifact or an antique allows you to touch the past. Like that was my way of knowing like this one wasn't mass produced like the one I could buy. This one was like hand stuffed, and it's like a religious relic to beat that religious thing to death.
Yeah. You know, like when the punk museum was like happening, like I kept getting emails from Vinny, who's like he was the drummer of Less Than Jake, and I don't
Hmm.
know, he was, I guess, part of it or like it's a
He's still there, yeah.
send stuff, and I was like, I never told him no. I just sort of blew him off, and uh, the reason why I blew him off isn't because like I don't believe in the project or whatever. It's just like I'm just too selfish, and I don't want to. I'll never see it again if it goes there, and I'm not. I it's like it's in a box, and I don't even look at it, but I don't want to give it away. Like
I get that.
it's very selfish. I don't collect records and stuff. I wean myself off of it. Like I said earlier, like uh 20 I also like I sold like 500. I didn't sell. I took to Goodwill like 500 books because I was like, what the fuck am I holding on to these trophies of books? I kept a couple, like maybe 100, 120 uh that I just like will read again or like maybe might read because I love them so much. But then the other like 500 books or whatever it was, maybe 1,000, I was like, why the fuck am I holding on to these or whatever? And I did the sort of same thing with music. Uh, but things like the things that would actually be good, like Gilman artifacts and stuff for the museum, like I was like, yeah, I was selfish about it. I was like, I don't want to give it to you guys. I didn't say it. I just sort of like didn't really. I wasn't a good guy. And Samiam is very, or I didn't. All my bands are very under, or I mean that's a subjective thing, but to me, like underrepresented at the Punk Rock Museum, and it didn't have to be that way. I just was a dick or selfish.
I think it's also the fact that our definitions of punk are so intensely personal. Like I went to the punk museum, and it's awesome to see this stuff en masse and see it presented like a museum piece. Like, oh my god, there's a germs cabinet and there's this thing in this cabinet. But there's a lot of stuff that's not there that to me should be represented because it is 100% part of the punk story. Mike and I really disagree about Dinosaur Jr. and the Melvins, and Fat Mike like hates those bands, and I think you can't tell punk story without telling those bands stories. And like you're saying earlier with Sonic Youth, um, certainly Dinosaur Jr. Uh, and I would lump Pavement into this because Stephen Malcolmus was in that band, the Straw Dogs, that used to come and hang out at the Gilman way back when, right? So like all of it comes out of punk, and people's definitions of punk are narrow. Punk is narrow. Punk is Young Marble Giants at the same time as it's Hatebreed, at the same time as it's Sam I Am, at the same time as it's Sonic Youth. Like it's everything that people claim it because it is. It's like a religious text. Like it's how you interpret it, right? And like what is your definition of punk? Like, is it some nihilistic fuck everything up thing, or is it like let's set up an all ages space so people can see this music and let's build a stage because I have time to do it?
Do you know Alan Watts?
Oh, things are so familiar. Like,
He's like this guy who's it's kind of hard to like explain what he was, but he's a guy from the 60s and the 70s that would do lectures, and he sort of boiled down a lot of what he did was boil down like Eastern philosophies and religions and Western, and he sort of became like an icon of kind of drug culture too, but existentialism and stuff. Uh, but I'm really into him. He's one of the most eloquent speakers I've ever heard. Because he's long dead, by the way. But I've heard hours and hours of his lectures, and I've never heard him go or get sidetracked or anything. He's just like the freest mind because he's such an intelligent person. And it's also humble. He's not like some kind of lecturer that's like, I'm better than anyone that's listening to me right now. But anyway, among the millions of topics he was talking about Zen, and I don't know that much about Zen, and I don't pretend to know about Zen. Actually, everything I know about Zen, I know from him. And when he was describing something about Zen, it's like, oh, Zen is punk rock, right? Because he said, if anyone tries to explain to you the definition of Zen, right, or what Zen is, or what Zen isn't, or just basically what the belief system is, that person doesn't know what Zen is, right? Like even being a spokesman of Zen is the antithesis of Zen. But even saying that what the antithesis of Zen is also kind of not very Zen either. And I just kind of think that, that's the same thing about punk. So if you say who's in punk, who's not in punk, or you're a spokesman for punk, uh, rather than just like what he is, which is observer of this, and you just say, this is what people have said about it, and this is what some people think about it, and whatever. And I don't know what it is either. That I kind of don't trust you, right? Like if you say, like, and I'm not coming down on Mike at all, but like Mike says that Dinosaur Jr. isn't punk, or the Melvins isn't punk, and like he loves Pennywise. I'm just like, okay, I just don't agree with you, and you don't know what punk is, Mike. Like me, of all people, telling Fat Mike, you don't know what punk is. But like in my opinion, if you're going to say that, you don't know what punk is, Mike.
well, I think that's these guys especially like and Ian MacKaye, like anyone that's made their career in this thing. And I say this as massive fans of both of them, and I would not be able to have this conversation with you without them leading me different places. But they are ultimately leaders of a sect and a religious sect, and it is in their best interest to promote their brand of this sect because you want people to give their tithing to your church, and that is buying the records or going to the shows or
Yeah.
and I guess it's like I'm making it as crass and evil as possible. I'm sure these guys, I know they would both be very upset and and yell at me about this, but and I don't mean it in a bad way because I think it's just a natural thing that kind of happens. And if you achieve success through your philosophy, of course you're going to believe that it works and that this is the true version of this thing. But like you're saying, like how can you pin this thing down? And it's so fucking boring when you do pin it down because then it has to be one sound or one vibe as opposed to just all of it existing at once. And like even the bullshit that sucks exists at the same time. Like there's people that have definitions of punk that would make both you and I throw up. And that's their like version of this thing. And I hate it, but they believe in it and they imbue that meaning into this thing for themselves. So, but just in regards to what we were talking about off air, I think there's something that happens, especially when you're a punk band and you find success, where, especially on like that sort of massive level, where your friends don't like you, the kids that supported you on the way up potentially turn their backs on you, and you kind of lose your peer group, and it's hard, right? Like it's something that like weighs on people because this is our lives as young people. So I can like, and I never met Kurt Cobain, and I might be completely overstating it, and definitely drugs are a huge factor in this thing. But it really does seem like the punk stuff weighed on him, like in a real heavy kind of way.
I mean, famously, the legend is it did, and so, yeah, I think it probably did, right?
Yeah, because like your friends, the people that
But
supported you, you're like they it just doesn't work anymore, especially in
I've
punk.
like, I've like, as just a fan, like obviously, I've pondered the thing, like the idea of Kurt Cobain and what he might be feeling, and I even thought of this about like Axl Rose, right? Once you get to the point where you take for granted all the good stuff that you can squeeze out of where you've gotten yourself to, right? Like, and you just take for granted the money and the drugs and the poontang or whatever it is that you consider positive. The rest really sucks, right? And yeah, add a healthy like a drug addiction, and it's just like I could really see how miserable it could be.
Hmm. Yeah, like it's and this is obviously cliched, but it is like a gilded cage at a certain point, especially if you didn't like the mainstream to begin with, and that's why you were in this place. Like if you
I
really
guess
hate,
Kurt Cobain seemed like a little bit of a nerd that maybe might have got like shoved in the garbage can, so to speak, in high school. And that whole idea of playing in an arena full of those guys, uh, that would be a big mind fuck.
yeah, oh God, yeah, and like to know that what you're doing is completely being lost on the audience. Like there's that story of Rage Against the Machine playing. I think it's like the last Free Tibet show, and they gave out free Mumia shirts, and kids were turning them out inside out, writing "Fry Mumia" on them. Like not every kid, certainly, but to know that your audience is now people that have completely lost the reason you probably got into doing this in the first place.
No, I think that's the big thing. Like just like there's probably like inner band things also in Rage Against the Machine, but that dynamic that you just described is probably one of the reasons why a guy like Zach Del Rocha could turn his back on that being that part of his life so easily.
Hmm. Like it really feels like he's a. Oh, sorry.
I remember reading not to go back and overstate my interest in Dead Kennedys, but reading it was in Max from Rock and Roll. I think it was an interview, and he talked about going to Europe and playing somewhere in Eastern Europe. Uh, his song was so misconstrued. It was "Kill the Poor," and wherever they were in Eastern Europe, it's, yes, yes, we love this song. We love this song. Yeah, kill the poor. Like, fucking Turkish. Fuck them. You dirty Turkish. And I just can't imagine, especially with that guy, he must have reacted when someone said something like misconstruing him so badly.
Yeah, well, that's it, and that's the other thing is like you're, especially in a scene where you're like playing to your friends. There's like shorthands and nuances and things that we understand. Like the Dicks hate police. Like they use some horrible language in that, but we know that they're talking as a character. But to a larger audience that doesn't know about the Dicks and who the Dicks were as people, and you hear that song out of context, there's a good chance you could misconstrue it because it's not from your world.
Right. Like, you mean like, oh, the dicks are a bunch of cop killer assholes or support?
No, they like mommy, mommy, look at your son. He's got a good job killing N words and Mexicans. Um, and it's a critique of the police, and it's and obviously something that doesn't fly now as a lyric. But I think if you hear it out of context, even back then, it would sound what the fuck is this band? Like, where's this coming from? Or like even seeing people dressed as skinheads. Like, we know what to recognize as someone being a Nazi skinhead and not being a Nazi skinhead because this is our world and we know the signals and we know
Oh
the
yeah, but to everyone else, it's just a bunch of skinheads.
just a
Yeah.
bunch of skinheads, and it doesn't, the nuance is lost. And I feel like obviously I'm jumping all over the place here, but I think when you become a huge band like that, the nuance of your band is going to be lost on people.
Yeah. I always like think about whether I would have liked to have been in a popular band or not. And I think like once you get past like say 1,000 people or something, which is like the most Samiam can get, or ever in any period of Samiam. Like you go to a 3,000 person show. For the most part, there's about 1,000 people that love your band, and then there's another 1,000 people. There's 2,000 that are there because that's a big show and a big band, and it's just a night out, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of exceptions. A lot of bands, like everyone all the way in the back, is just way into the band and stuff. But I don't think it would be very rewarding to be in a bigger band than I'm in. And if it meant that I had to play with people I just absolutely can't relate to on any level. And I think that they or they project something onto to me and my friends, our group, that was something that we're like totally against, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so like when you're like Kurt Cobain or any big artist, it's like long ago you've taken for granted the money aspect and your quality of life because you've been like living that for a long time. And there's no indication that it's ever going to go away. So it's like, I don't care. Like, oh, put the extra million over in the second bedroom closet. You know, it's like it's just another drop in the bucket or whatever. But when you lose actually what at the core of why you started what you were doing, which is like maybe to express yourself in some way, and that's lost. Um, you know, you're not taking for granted when you're accepted like wholeheartedly. Uh, an inverse is when you're just completely misunderstood, right? And I could see that being just like a huge mind fuck, especially for a singer, which I'm not. But if you were a singer and a lyricist, and it was just like completely misconstrued, it's like what? Like if you were Rage Against the Machine at Woodstock, the disaster Woodstock or whatever, and you're like, I'm the soundtrack for toxic masculinity and rape culture. Like, I quit right now, and I'm never going back to this band. You know?
I watched those Woodstock documentaries and I had kind of a thought, and this is probably the most selfish thought you can have, but like, how would I handle this as a singer in a band?
Yeah.
Like, if I was Rage Against the Machine, would I go out there and play it? And they obviously handled it well, I think, under the circumstances, like where they just did a really subdued set, realizing that it might cause more problems if they did something else, I imagine. But yeah, like you're saying, like, and maybe it didn't seem as bad as it looks now at the time from
Probably
backstage.
didn't look that bad from the stage either.
Yeah, like yeah, like I wonder what it would feel like to be there. And like you're saying, like you, especially after the fact, like realizing like this is the fucking audience that we were playing to that night, and this is where it is for the band. Like I think having money must be a mind fuck at a certain point, like tons of money, where you like enough money that you could wake up every day and just walk out and change someone's fucking life and not feel it. Like you could walk out and buy someone a house or pay for college for a bunch of kids. And that could be your whole existence, is just giving away this money that you've accumulated. But you kind of have to like put that aside. And I think that's probably why a lot of people wind up looking inward, and drugs and alcohol become an issue, certainly for some people. But like a lot of people turn to transcendental meditation or cults or something that kind of like justifies the existence. And once again, not to especially punk, but especially punk, where it's kind of like this red pill that we all took, and we realized that capitalist society, which we're all trapped in, we all got to exist in this world, but like ultimately it's bullshit. And billionaires are evil and millionaires are at best chaotic neutral. and we're just in these people's worlds, and then all of a sudden to have to like spit out that red pill, obviously is a loaded one, but to spit out that red pill and go back into the matrix and just be like, I'm part of this machine now. It's yeah, I think it would be a mind fuck. And like you're saying, like, would you want it? Like, I'd love the money, but like everything else seems, like you're saying, pretty fucking brutal
Yeah.
in a really privileged way.
Especially like I'm not like a super passionate person politically, and I never have been. And I'm like very a moderate person when it comes to like most of my beliefs. Like I'm not an atheist by any means, and I'm not religious by any means. I actually have this like kind of like fight with the singer of my band. Or we don't have it, but we used to. I just know better not to talk about like subjects. But he's like a communist, and he hates liberals, which is I never knew that was part of like sort of being a communist or like a modern way is hating liberals. I was like, oh, like he's like I respect like a right wing person more than a freaking like indifferent liberal. It doesn't want like nothing get done or whatever. And I'm just like, I never even thought of that as being a possibility that someone would think that way. Because I'm anti-capitalist, but I'm also just like resigned to the fact that I live in a capitalist society and I don't spend a lot of time searching for an alternative because I just feel powerless. He doesn't, and he's like a really, and he gets in a lot of trouble for being communist and stuff. Um,
But I think like both of you though are like not part of the machine. Like they, like we're all raging against this machine, and like yeah, there's different levels of being against it, but there's this sort of dream that's sold to us, and it's kind of woven to kind of distract us from the realities of the world, and like, and I don't think it's on necessarily a political level, but I just think in every level, and to become part of that dream spinning machine for people. Like
yeah,
I never met Kurt, so I don't know what he was like, and I people have told me that he'd be fine with this, he'd love it. But I went through the mall the other day, and every store, this was months ago, but every store had a Nirvana shirt. Like every fucking mall jeans store thing,
yep.
every random person's wearing a Nirvana shirt, and I'm like, I don't think this is what he would have wanted, or like
I think
certainly when he started.
it already got to the point where it's not what he wanted, right? Right.
Yeah.
Like, as big as it is now after a couple of decades extra. Of like he's sort of like Marilyn Monroe, right? Or he's like James Dean or whatever, which is just like unfathomably huge of a pillar of the icon on the pillar of the all the different icons. He's one of those main guys, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like Tupac is too. Like, oh, how did that happen? And it's that I sort of mentioned that about like Zen and punk, and it's like you got to be a real like to me a mistaken person to assume the role as a spokesman for like punk or whatever this is that we're talking about. To me, this is to me, and opinions are like asshole, blah blah blah. But like to me, I think that if I was in the position that Kurt Cobain was in, I would have this real like problem because people are putting me on this pedestal like I am a spokesperson. And unfortunately, I got a microphone in my face and a camera in my face all the time. And even when I try not to be, I am. And this is just like most people don't care that much, but I care enough that like I don't want this responsibility to talk about this shit as an authoritative figure, and I hate it. And he was so big that it was like he couldn't escape it, right?
Yeah, because that's why I always say like Nirvana's commercially successful, but I think Green Day is really the first successful punk band because they were able to figure a way to, and I don't know those dudes, but like to weather the storm and to exist in this world, um, and not eat themselves alive, or at least publicly not eat themselves alive.
Yeah. No, yeah. They're like, I mean, they're weirdos, but they were really weirdos before they were famous. Like, um, and I just, they've had their fair share of scandals with divorces and DUIs or whatever normal life stuff, but nothing major, like definitely no death or anything like that, you know. And they also like seem like you always hear about these bands like the Beatles and the Stones and Creedence Clearwater Revival and everyone that just all their money gets tied up and the lawyers take it all because there's all these crazy lawsuits. As far as I understand, which I don't understand, I'm not like I don't know them anymore or anything. They're all just like pretty secure and wealthy and everything's going good. There's no big giant problems like as far as like holy shit like Trey went bankrupt or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's the benefits of having a three-piece, and I think it's also like the
Singing together too, like the Offspring, they have like two guys and everyone else is new, right?
Is it like that now? Noodles and
I think
Dexter?
there's like 6 guys on stage in the Offspring, and it's like 4 guys or something, and then the 2 guys, the singer and the guitar player.
See,
Which
Offspring,
tons of lawsuits and everything that brought them to there, right?
Offspring to me is like a true glitch in the matrix, their success, because if you were to write that out on paper, like you write Green Day out on paper, it makes sense. Like, okay, they're good looking guys writing really catchy, sweet songs with
Yeah.
harmonies.
Stage presence and personality too, which Offspring don't have.
Yeah, like Offspring, it's like they look kind of weird. The vocals are definitely strange. I'm a fan of it, but like it just shouldn't have become what it became.
We like when we like we had a record called Clumsy that was on Atlantic, and when we were on Atlantic, our drummer joined. It was a time when Stone Temple Pilots were having problems or whatever, and so he started a solo band. And Vic, our drummer, he ended up leaving Samiam to be in Whelan's band, but he was in both bands simultaneously. And we were down here in LA practicing at this place, and Vic was really late. And who strolls into our room but Scott Whelan? And we were all just like, what? And he was out of his mind on whatever drug he was on, whether it's heroin or crack or a combination of both. And he goes, "Hey, you guys, you're the Vic and the Will Sus and yeah, Sam I am. Oh, Sam I am. That's right. That's right. You guys are friends with the Green Day guys, right?" And I go, and we're like, we were kind of like, "Yes, sir." We were all just like, "Yeah." And he goes, I get the Green Day. I get the Green Day. I get it. They write songs. I get it. That boy could sing or whatever and stuff. What is this Offspring? What the fuck is it with this Offspring? Like as if we were part of the Offspring or we knew the Offspring personally or we were partially responsible for the Offspring. It's like, they are the worst. Tell me they're not the worst. They're not the worst. And we were kind of a gasp and we didn't acknowledge it or anything. We're just like, oh, well, the Offspring, good for them or whatever. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, Vic Slate, you want me to play drums? I'll play a couple songs with you. And he was just like fairly sad or whatever. We're kind of like, no, sir. And then he wanders off. He wanders off, and then like Vic was in there, we're practicing. He comes in and he looks at Vic, and then he looks at Vic and he goes, Vic doesn't have it. And looked just to anyone that might be in the earshot, and he goes, does anyone have $20 for my brother? My brother needs to get a pizza or whatever. And we're like, wait, this $1 million guy is asking us strangers for $20 for pizza. Then when he went out of the room, Vic goes, oh yeah, like he doesn't have money in his pocket because he has this drug problem or whatever, and all his managers don't let him have any money. He has no money. They'll buy him whatever he needs or whatever. So, but anyway, his hatred for the Offspring was priceless to hear because like it was the off recording. I said something like the biggest compliment a guy in a band could give to another guy in a band, it would be if you find out that guy hates your band because he's jealous of your band, right? And the worst compliment is it's like, dude, and Samiam's gotten this from tons of bands, tons of big bands too. Like they go like, there's one band in the bus that we always argue about what's going to be played in the bus, and so fuck them. And one guy likes it. No, we don't play it. One band we always agree is your band, Sandman. We all love it. And I'm just like, well, that was the biggest insult you give, because all you said is we're losers and you guys aren't threatened by us, and so you all like us. I was like, well, guess what? The guy from Stone Temple Pilots was really threatened and fucking hated the Osprey.
I think that's though there is like a special quality to being a band's band where
It's the I went to a party where Rise Against played, and now I'm really good friends with some of them and stuff. But I met Tim, the singer, and I just said, oh yeah, I did graphic design. I laid out a couple of their records, and he was like, oh yeah, oh Sam, oh yeah, yeah. He probably said that we all listen to it and we don't argue about it, because all of them have separately told me that they like Sam or whatever. But I looked at him like really deep in his eye, and I pretty much said what I just told you. It's like, it's because you're not threatened by us, and we're losers, and it's like you're free to like us, right? Like there's got to be a whole long list of bands that are in the upcoming right now that you're kind of like, oh, fuck those guys, they suck because they're threatening. And he looked at me really deep in my eyes and go, no, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. And so, and all I could think of, and I don't mean this, but like I think it's like, liar.
I do believe Tim, because Tim is like Tim is like a special kind of person in that way. Like he does feel like really genuine in his approach, and there's definitely
no, I don't doubt it. That's why I said I didn't tell him this. I just thought it to myself, and it was a me thing, not a him thing. I was like, liar, because I just don't believe that people could be like.
Well, and go on, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, I think in terms of like political bans, and obviously, certainly in light of everything that's come out now, but there was like Anti-Flag, and it always rung different to me because it felt more disingenuous than something like when Tim's talking about it, and like. Yeah, like, so I don't know, but I do believe him. I think he's being earnest in when he says that to you.
I mean, I'd like to think so.
Yeah,
I think actually people Rise Against like Sam a lot.
I agree. I definitely think so, and I like they. It's interesting too, because like you look at like the most successful bands to come out of punk post the sort of the Epitaph Lookout explosion. It's all those Chicago bands, and it's like Fall Out Boy, them, and I guess Alkaline Trio as well. And there's sort of this. It's interesting because they're all kind of out of the DIY punk scene again. Like it's a real.
They're all from Fireside Bowl.
Yeah, Fireside Bowl, and like they all had pre-bands this whole thing too, and they're all some were in the same bands with each other back then, and things like that. Like it really did feel like the next punk scene to kind of explode. And I guess Fireside Bowl, you're right. Like it's kind of like the Gilman for that scene.
I think Chicago is just like such a slow burn. Like if you go back to like Effigies and Naked Ray Gun to Till, you had Rise Against or Alkaline Trio. They didn't have their like Seattle moment or their East Bay moment, because it's just like consistent and slow that led up to Rise Against, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like Rise didn't get big, and then suddenly we got to sign that any band that goes boom ba from Chicago just didn't happen, you know?
Like I wonder,
there was nothing between Heart and Mudhoney. What was there in Seattle?
Like that blew up type thing. Like for me, there's definitely great records there, but
No, I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm saying that would put them in the map.
Yeah.
The map.
Yeah, you're right. Like there's not, well, Sir Mix-a-Lot, but and I guess Duff.
Yeah, but no one knows. Only people like you or I with an unhealthy attachment to music and music history know that.
I think it's amazing that Nikki Sixx, Duff, El Duce, Sir Mix-a-Lot, the Screamers, and more that I'm leaving off, all went to the same high school. And a lot of those people were there at the same time. Not Nikki Sixx and Duff, but like, and El Duce, I think, was in Nikki Sixx's class and the Screamers. But Sir Mix-a-Lot and Duff were at school together.
Wow. I wonder if they ever had any kind of encounter in high school.
Duff's Duff says he thinks he remembers them. He's like, yeah, I really do think I remember him back then. But maybe he's just timming me.
It just, I mean, that's be such. It's just too good to not put in people's minds.
Yeah, exactly. Print the legend. Always print the legend. Speaking of print the legend, I got questions for you if you can stomach them.
Yeah, I can stomach all of them.
Uh, Bugger All, Two Tops, sick ass song. What was the deal with Bugger All?
So Bugger All was Soup happened, and then Tom, the guitar player, who was kind of the songwriter and or music writer, when he quit, we were like, oh fuck, um, we need to keep this going. And I went to Cal, Cal Berkeley, and this girl, Lisa, was in our friend group. She was in our friend group because her best friend was Kim, and Kim was Silly Girl from, I think she was probably from Redondo Beach or something. She was Silly Girl from the Descendants song Silly Girl, right?
Oh wow.
And Soup, you obviously could tell that that Soup was like a really bad uh, carbon copy of the Descendants, so we wish we were Descendants. And so then when we met Lisa and Kim, Lisa was going out with Ray, who had just quit the Descendants, and he was living in Berkeley and didn't have any friends and stuff. And like he quit Descendants and wanted to get out of music and stuff. But we just pestered Lisa into browbeating him into being in a band, sort of, which must have been just so incredibly like disheartening to go from like a constantly touring like real band like the Descendants to being in a band that used to be called fucking Soup, and that was called Bugger All, like two of the worst names ever in the history of the planet or whatever. But yeah, and so then we were on the whatever that compilation was, which was like the kind of the genesis of recorded Gilman music. It had like Isocracy was on it, and Crimpsoupivyocracy was on it. I don't know about, I think Op Ivy was on it. Just I
Yeah.
turn it around, you know,
Turnaround comp, yeah. And Sticky's on it.
sticky, yeah.
Future No Use for a Name member, Chris Dodge.
Right. And also general manager of Fat Records too.
General manager of Fat Records. And also Spaz and all the other shit he did that's awesome. But like that stuff too.
We recorded for that and did that. I don't know. I think we might have played a show, but we just couldn't hold on to Ray because Ray was just like, listen, you guys are really nice kids or whatever. He was a little bit older than us, but like I didn't move up here to join a shittier version of the band I just like fled LA for, And I don't know what the deal is with and I don't know Ray. I haven't spoken to him in 30 years, but I don't know what the deal is with him and the Descendants are, because when the Descendants movie came out, like they were so silent about Ray, and Ray was so conspicuously missing from that really comprehensive documentary that it made it more to me what like more curious and like put a microscope on it, like why the fuck, what is the deal with Ray Cooper and the Descendants? Like I would love to know.
Yeah.
And then I only in the Descendants I talk to Bill when I see him, but like mainly just talk to Carl and Stefan. And I wouldn't ask him, first of all, it's rude to ask, hey, why did you replace the other guy? Or what's his deal? It would be rude for me to ask, but I would love to know. As a 40-year lover of a band, and then knowing a guy that was in it and never knowing why he's not in it, like, and why he didn't want to be in the movie, and like, what's he doing now? Like, I would so love to know. I'm sure there's a lot of Descendants fans that would love to know, but I feel like like I want to know more than Descendants super fans because I was like briefly involved in that circle.
Yeah, it's your bandmate. Of course, you
Yeah,
want to
I
find
mean
out
it
what
was
that's.
very short that Bugger All was together, and I we didn't get past the three of us that idolizing Ray to move into friendship. That's how short Bugger All was together. We were all just like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like if you joined a band that idolized fucked up and they were all 14, and it's like you'd have to be in a band with them until at least they turned 15 before you could actually talk to them. They would stop going, Damian, we practice on Tuesday.
I think it would also be so jarring to go because he was also in, was it SWA, for a while too. Like he was seemingly deep in that SST
Yeah.
cult, I guess, because it does seem like kind of like a separate little world unto itself. And I imagine like it would have just been freeing to be in a completely different world with like a bunch of young kids, and because it's a lot of
It was so
pressure.
brief. And I didn't think he wanted to be in it. Like he didn't, but he was like, I could actually honestly say this one thing, and that it's funny because I just told this to Stefan at Fest, how I'm going to tell you two things about Descendants. And I talked so much about Dead Kennedys before as if I'm a super Descendants, Dead Kennedys fan. And now I'm super Descendants fan. And it's like, I'm not like, I love them both, but I went to the first show after the pandemic was to go see Rise Against this big amphitheater down here in LA. Because like I said, I made friends with at that party. And Brandon came to our show in Denver, and he got drunk, and he kind of like did the opposite. Like people were probably looking over, going, "What's going on?" Because he got drunk, and he was just being like kind of like a Punisher to Samiam, and he's this guy in Rise Against. It was kind of funny, only because he's drunk, not because he's a Punisher. Not Punisher is the wrong word. He was just being like really effusive, like that was so great. And what? And I was like, you're drunk. Um, um, but anyway, I went to go see Rice Goods and Descendants opened up, and my girlfriend goes, "Oh wow, this is Descendants. I really like Descendants." She doesn't know like punk rock music and stuff, and I go, they start playing Clean Sheets, and I leaned over to her and I go, "This song was the song that the first time I ever learned a guitar solo was this song, and this is was the first band where I learned like anything on guitar was like learning it from a tape. Like the first day I played guitar, I learned a Descendants song, and that's what maybe I could do this. And then we played at Fest last year, and I had a little conversation with Stefan, and I told him, yeah, we went to your show, and my girlfriend loved you guys. I mean, I did too, obviously. You guys are so great in front of a big crowd like that. And I told him like, like I probably never told you this, but like Descendants is how I learned how to play guitar, and you in particular. And I go, oh, that's really nice. And I told her like the guitar lead in Clean Sheet sounds difficult, but it's really, really easy. And I told her, and I looked at him and he goes, well, it's not that easy. It's to me. And I go, no, well, like, there's a lot of notes where you go da 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 da, where the notes, it sounds all like fast, but the notes are right next to each other. So when you're a shitty guitar player, you can actually figure it out, first of all. And second of all, it's not that hard to play because you're only using two strings. And it goes, oh, I guess that's right. Like I wasn't demeaning it. I was just saying, right, I could learn it and play it really shittily. And then it goes, oh, well, oh, okay, that's nice. And then on the way home, we played Descendants Away. I gave her the brief synopsis of what the Descendants are about. And it goes, oh, how did that go? Like meaning, how did she like that? And I'm kind of an asshole. I'm always honest, especially if I like a guy and I want to like talk to him. And I go, not well. And he goes, what? Like his head cocked. He goes, what do you mean? Because, well, she loved freaking Clean Sheets, loved Silly Girl, like loved all these songs. And I looked at him real serious and stuff, like performatively. I looked at him to tell him this. And I go, and then came a little song called Iceman Cometh. And he just completely cracked up because he was like, it's like, oh yeah, we had some crazy ideas back then. Like,
It's funny when you listen to Milo Goes to College because it reminds me a lot in a way of almost like the inverse of My War, where there's like, infamously, are you a side one My War person or a side two My War person? I
yeah,
think I think it's kind of the same thing with the Descendants and Milo Goes to College. Like side two, if you're going to play someone a record for the Descendants and be like, here's why you're going to like this band, like that's an amazing jumping off point. Side one, it's a harder sell.
yeah, no, it's really weird. Like, music's just a weird thing, right? Like what do you do it for? Like, do you do it for yourself only, or do you do it a little bit for the audience, or do you do it all for the audience, right? I'm selfish, right? But not in the way most people are selfish on that attitude. I do it like a set list. I'm very selfish in the respect that I want the show to go well. So I want to just play only the hits. I don't want to play any other song except the ones I know that the people want to hear. Because I'm selfish, because I want to have a good show. Because when the audience is bad, Samiam's pretty bad. Like that's not true for good bands or better bands. The audience could be shitty and the band's great. But for Samiam, in general, when the audience is sparse or the audience isn't going for us, we're not very good. Because we're not performers, right? We're just like a band that plays their songs. Uh, and But there's an argument within Samiam, and it's between me and the singer and the other guitar player. And those guys, they're not 100% aligned, but they're much more aligned than I am. Like I'll go, hey, someone wrote me, or I met someone in the bathroom. It's just happened in Barcelona like a couple weeks ago. They asked for Ordinary Life, which is a Sam I Am song. It's not my fucking favorite song, and I don't enjoy particularly playing that song. But it's come up in recent years. I think it's gained traction through Spotify. And so people ask for it like almost routinely. Uh, and it's not like I love that song or I want to play it or have any ego about that song because I happen to write the music to that song. It's just like someone wants to play it, let's play it for them. Jason has a reaction that's like, and it's valid. It's like, I don't like the idea of the audience dictating what we play. And so he almost always has a knee-jerk reaction, which is, who asked? And like, why did they ask? Or whatever. And he's like, I don't want to do that because he doesn't like the idea of being told what to do. I understand that. But Sean, the other guitar player, doesn't like that song, which is completely valid. And doesn't feel like it represents what he likes about Sam I Am or he feels Sam is about, which is also completely valid. But he also goes a step further and he says, I don't play music for the audience or to make the audience happy. I play for myself, which is almost like it's a big rift between me and him. We've gotten fights about this, and not just me, but and it's about set lists and stuff. And I just personally I'm not offended by his point of view, and I actually respect his point of view. I just don't want to participate. Like I said, I'm selfish. I want to have a good show from the beginning and the end, and we've been around long enough that we could definitely play like an hour and 15 or an hour and a half where every song is accepted by the audience enthusiastically if we pick the right song list. But fortunately, we don't do that. There's probably like 3 to 5 songs that we play that aren't people's favorites, and it's played because someone else wants to play them within the band or whatever. And like I said, I totally respect it, even though I fight with them some nights about it. How did I?
Well, I was going to say,
My brain is so rotten. Like the amount of times I've lost my train of thought and why I said things today makes me sound so fucking stupid. Which I don't care. I'm stupid. Who cares? But yeah, I don't know why I just. Oh, but with the train of thought, it came back to me. It's just talking about the concept of being in like the best punk band ever to play pop style music. Right? I'm skirting around calling Descendants pop punk because like that's the last thing I want to lump them into. Um, they're like the mold was broken after the Descendants as far as playing melodic punky music and stuff, and they're so good at it. They're the kings of it. But then they also like felt the need to do like discordant, like Spinal Tap level jazz shit, right, or whatever. I don't know. Like I don't even hate it. Like some of it I probably hate. I haven't heard it in a long time, but like the Iceman, like I didn't tell Stefan that I hate Iceman. Like I have affinity for it actually after all these years. But Christina was just like, wait, this is the same band? Like what the fuck?
Yeah, I think All is kind of like a monument to that. Like they went and they did All, and in good and bad weather. And it's fascinating with All too because there's like that scene, cruise record scene, and it's almost an international scene if you lump like Mega City 4 and the Hard-Ons and the Doughboys and the Asexuals kind of in it. Like this melodic punk kind of thing, but like definitely like proficient kind of player type level, kind of going for it in some cases. That scene kind of gets completely washed away. It seems like there's just no remnant of
Mega
it
City
after.
4. Mega City 4 is like I would put Mega City. There's a couple of bands I would put on the like the pantheon of pop. There's bands that like people that are really enthusiastic about a pop punk never heard of and never will hear of. But like Body Jar in Australia is one. Mega City 4, like to me, Mega City 4 and my brother too. It's like one of the most important bands, and just wrote some of the best. The first two records, and there's a whole bunch of 7 inches. They're just like I'm sorry, like way better than Green Day. Like and I love Green Day or whatever, but like that was a talented fucking band that and does anyone it's their records aren't even on Spotify. Like they have some weird 1996 record, like way after the fact that's on Spotify, but like who cares who wins is not on there. Like that record is like a flawless pop punk or I hate using that word, like punkish pop record, like with a just like one of those guys that comes around like very infrequently, singer-songwriter guys, you know? Um, and then he goes and temporarily joins the Doughboys and quickly writes their best 2 songs that are so much better than any other Doughboys songs. Like it's insane, right? Even though he's probably in the band for like 6 months or whatever.
He was on Canadian TV though. There's footage of him playing with them on, I can't remember what talk show now, that I saw recently online. You're
And he's
right. They're one of the greatest of all time. I
yeah.
love that.
Oh, I love the Doughboys too,
No,
but
no,
like
I mean Mega City 4. I love the Doughboys as well, but
I love the Doughboys, but like Shine, what's the other their hit from the A&M record?
uh,
They just whatever the other one is, I can look it up or whatever. But they're written by Wiz. They sound like Mega City 4, but played by Doughboys, and they're just as much as I love Doughboys, they're 1,000 times better than the next best Doughboy song, right? And this is all opinions, and I'm talking not as a guy from Samiam or whatever. I'm talking as a music fanatic, like you, a guy that unhealthy attachment to music.
yes.
But
I
fucking,
feel
I hate when I make an opinion and they go, "Yeah, but what about your fucking shitty band?" And I go, "I'm not talking. It's the guy that's in a fucking shitty band." And you didn't have to say that. I know.
and it,
Oh,
and all this shit is the best shit in the world. We're just like positioning stuff like who's 1 and 2 type thing with a lot of these bands. Like as much as I love Mega City 4, Leatherface is the band I find from that scene I listen to the most.
Leatherface is. is slightly askew. I would say that Leatherface is not part of that. If there was a big four, that Leatherface is, and I might be just my narrow thing, but it's like Hot Water Music, like a Veil maybe or D4 and Samiam, and Leatherface is more like their thing. That's their group. I don't really like. I don't see Leatherface and Mega City 4 or Leatherface and like Leatherface and Big Joe Car. No, they don't go together. That's a different scene.
I think you're right,
Like
but I
different
think
universe.
Leatherface in England, I think at that time was kind of, they were all like, and it's pre-Britpop, and it's almost like the enemy world before the
Yeah, they were an
Britpop thing.
enemy. They were an enemy, and Snuff was an enemy, but they were still like much more punk,
Hmm.
senseless things, and
Think and Perfect Days,
or
which
next
is,
time a Festman even, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. And there's like Decline too. I fucking love that Decline, those Decline records. Um,
Mm.
but it's weird when you go to England, no one there, like young people wise, is really seemingly into that stuff. I found.
No, and no, but Leatherface are what like stands the test of time a lot more than Mega City 4, I think.
Yeah,
Mega,
like I
the
agree with you, but
legend of Leatherface that has lasted a lot longer.
yeah, and I think the sonic, like you said, with Avail, Hot Water Music, and that kind of whole thing in the wake of them, in a way, like that. I think that's why that sound resonates still, and like the Hot Water Music Avail split, where there was, I think that was like, or Hot Water Music Leatherface split. Sorry, um, I think that was like an introduction for like a
They took
whole,
him on tour around 2002,
yeah,
and
with Dillinger 4 and the Swarm from Toronto played a bunch of the shows, which I roadied for, but only on the second half when we didn't play with very many good bands. I missed the good band part of the tour. Um,
but maybe they're bigger in America than they are in England. But like I think that Leatherface, like if Dickie was still alive and they went on tour and they were good because they drink too much and they're not always good live, they would be a big band in the world. So, but Mega City 4, if they did a reunion show, it's like if the guy was still alive, uh, would it be big? I don't think so.
yeah, like it's interesting with Leatherface because I think you're right. I think it's bigger in America than it is in England,
Okay.
with people. Just
Yeah.
from talking to people there, like I've talked to like a lot of, mainly I guess hardcore kids, but just I'm shocked. I'm like, wait, like one of the best bands of all time is from here, and you don't listen to this? Like you got to listen to this shit.
Yeah. Music
Like,
kind of took a turn for the youth music kind of took a turn for the worst in the 2000s, like with sappy pop punk and metalcore, and kind of like confused young people. And I think they're sort of coming back to like better music, with many notable exceptions. I'm not like saying a whole decade's worth of music was in the shit or anything, but like if you're just like a kind of dumb kid that's casually into like punk and metal and stuff, like you might be like into something that sounds a lot more like Korn or Limp Bizkit unwittingly, like a current band that sound like hardcore band that sounds much more like Korn or Limp Bizkit, and the whole like presentation and ideology is more aligned with Limp Bizkit than than Leatherface, which is such a shame.
mhm.
I feel like, but the thing is, it's like me and you are talking and like this unhealthy attachment to music and stuff. We sort of like make standards that we sort of like want to impose on casual music listeners and stuff, which is a little bit unfair, right? Like, what's wrong with loving Limp Bizkit and Corn? Like, nothing. And what's wrong with not knowing about Leatherface? But like, like it bothers me that what you when you say that people don't know who Leatherface is. It's like
Well,
I'm mad now.
like you, it happens, right? Like, 'cause it's a natural part of the life cycle. Like, um, like it would be unheard of back in the '90s to say you were a hardcore kid and you liked Limp Bizkit or Korn. Unless you're from Bakersfield, it was acceptable to like Korn from Bakersfield. But everywhere else, it was like, why would you like these fucking bands? And but if you're a kid and you're getting into it, it's permissible. It's like it's part of your foundation. So and it's interesting you see it with the emo thing, like how that genre is taken up now, where it's completely stripped of kind of everything that it was originally like. Not that these original people call themselves that, but that was like kind of like the original part of this music, like this DIY, super honest form of expression. And like you're saying, being made by like true freaks to just being this like hyper fashion,
Yeah.
uh,
It's
glam
when
metal thing.
it's I see it in all sorts of different kinds of things, not just music, but it's when like something that is created by and for like outsider, like there I guess there's a term called outsider music, right? And there's same thing with cinema or literature or kind of like any kind of intellectual property. It's like there's things that are made for outsiders, by outsiders. Uh, and there's nothing really noble about feeling like you don't fit in, right? Like I've always, since I was very young, just felt like I didn't fit in. When Gilmore was happening, like I was bummed because like supposedly it's this thing that everyone like, hey, there's a place for us misfits and stuff. And I was like, I didn't feel particularly at the time part of it because guess what? I'm such a misfit. I'm a misfit of the misfit scene, right? Um, and then you have people that don't even appreciate that dynamic of misfit for misfit or like a voice for the people that don't have a voice. They're actually really into being popular and they're really into conforming, and like so emo happened and then there's this thing called screamo and there's this thing called scene. I don't know exactly what it is. I just know what it looks like and what you look like. And those are people that are sort of almost like they're almost like nonconformists or misfit or alienated people posers, where actually they really are like the most popular person in their high school, and they're actually trying to be the most popular person on MySpace at the time or whatever. And like, they're in these bands that are at Warped Tour, and they're playing in front of 10,000 people, and they're the most popular thing. So they're really actually like bastardize what emo is because like when Knapsack got back together, we got offered to go play an emo night thing. And at that time, I didn't know what emo night was. And Blair was smart enough because of Jealous Sound, his band after Knapsack, he's savvy enough to know what emo had become because he was playing with these young emo bands in Jealous Sound. And he goes, "Oh no, we don't want to do emo night." And I was like, "No, it'd be cool." The promoters, our booking agent said, the promoter said it's always sold out and we're going to give you like a bunch of money or whatever. And he goes, "No, dude, you don't understand." And so we went to an emo night for him to show me, or maybe we didn't go. He just explained it to me the way I understand. And then I realized, oh shit, like the last thing that Knapsack would work at is emo night. Like we're so far away from emo night that like it would be just this horrible debacle if Knapsack played it. And I was like, that's when I kind of that when Naps it was 2013 when Knapsack got back together. It's when I sort of got re-educated to what emo had become. Like um, emo is not Texas Reason and Promise Ring or Get Up Kids or anything. Those bands are old hat. Emo is Escape the Fate or Falling in Reverse or whatever it is to these people. And also this other dynamic Blair explained to me, which I think is really weird, is that to a lot of people, emo is rooted in Third Eye Blind and Blink-182. And I'm like, what? Like, to me, like, what could be farther than either of those bands? But if you ask like most people in 2024, what's emo? And I go, I love emo. I love emo. Blink-182 is one of my favorite bands. And doop 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 doop. I was like, really? Yeah.
it's funny because like these are things that we know and we all kind of understand. Even though you and me are miles apart, like we have the same definition because we're part of the same stream. And I've got, you meet people all over the world and we all kind of know these things. But in the larger world, they're taken up so differently. Like you're saying, Nate was on the podcast the other day from Foo Fighters, and I'm telling him how, yeah, kids call The Color and the Shape an emo record. Like that's an emo record for this generation of kids. And he's like, no, not at all. And it is because it's not the emo that he's from or the emo that we're all from. It's how it's taken up. And in the same way, I remember going to see L7 play a show and talk to some people, and they were like, "Yeah, I just love all these Riot Girl bands." And I'm like, I don't think they would be want to be like, not that they didn't like Riot Girl, they hated it, but they were. It's its own thing. Like it's not part of this other thing, which was a very specific thing. But like, if once again, like that skinhead thing, if you're not from this culture and you don't understand the nuances, it's going to have like this much broader definition for people, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the asshole for caring and not just being open-minded, you know. I have a band in LA called Ways Away, and we played a lot of festivals in Europe over the summer. And I had this metalcore. We played these kind of like uh, a couple of big festivals that they're called punk and hardcore, but they're really like Limp Bizkit festivals, you know, because the headliners, it's just two bands in particular, like just really stood out to me where I was like, damn, I'm so old, I just don't get this. And one was called Lorna Shore. Do you know, are you familiar with them?
I've never heard of them. You stumped me.
They're fucking huge as shit. They're like the biggest thing. Like they were not the headliners of the festival, but they're like one step below stadiums, right? And they're fucking amazing. I don't know how much of it's playback and how much real, but there's like it's like imagine a band with Eddie Van Halen on guitar, um, uh, Neil Peart on drums, and like Jaco Pastorius on bass, right? And they're going out there playing like just crazy, crazy like deathcore. I'm not going to embarrass myself and age myself by trying to like define what it is they think they're playing or whatever. And it's all amazing sounding, but just fucking god awful to my old man ears or whatever. And then they have this singer. You have to go watch some videos. It's just like incredibly. It's just like, and then the biggest crowd of the night. Like, and after big ass bands play these festivals, like big, way bigger names, and like learners. It was kind of like what I was saying about Messingers at Fest. It's like, yeah, they didn't play last, but they're like the headliners, really. You know, Lorna Shore was like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other band I saw that was like that was a couple years ago, and I feel like maybe they were a little bit at their height, where it was Knocked Loose. You know them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And my brother and I just like it was like 15 seconds. We looked at each other like, we got to get out of here. And it's like this is the worst shit I've ever heard in my life. And they're the biggest shit. They were at least at that month or like 6 months, because hardcore's so fickle nowadays. That were the shit. That release was the shit. And I was just like, oh God, like I know I mostly listen to Hall and Oates and freaking, old man music anyway, or like classic Ono band, but like I do love like aggressive music and like unmelodic music too. But I just am so old I can't get into this shit. And that what I'm leading up to is like these guys think they're in metal bands or hardcore bands or something like that and stuff. And I'm like especially like Not Loose sounds like Limp Bizkit. Like they're fucking Limp Bizkit with a shrill singer. Like it's not like Terror is a contemporary hardcore band, but like am I like really dumb and don't realize that Knocked Loose is a hardcore band? Because they didn't sound like a hardcore band to me.
I think
And Lorna Shore didn't sound like a metal band to me, but that's what they are.
yeah, I think that's part of the natural evolution of this thing, and that's why it stays around. Like that, and that because it's always going to be. And these bands are obviously huge, and I'm not familiar enough to know if they're actually part of the zeitgeist of like hardcore. You know, in the same way we're talking about like this sort of like common shared culture that we all have around the world. But there that is surviving and that is passed down. And like I remember when that Refused Shape of Punk to Come record came out, going to the record store and the dudes at the record store being like, "This fucking sucks," and like
Really?
just being
I
like,
never heard that. I never
"Oh,"
heard someone not get that.
because it wasn't fast and it wasn't I don't know what it was at that time, and I'm trying to remember. Like, it wasn't Japanese hardcore, I guess, for the person I was talking to at that point. Like, they were super into Japanese hardcore stuff, and it was kind of a controversial record when that came out. Not in any sort of like political way, but I think sound wise, and I think that record is like a big dividing line. But I think that's also what makes hardcore amazing, is because as much as that record inspired people to make music because they loved it, I think it also inspired people to make music because they hated it. Like Jamie Josta has this quote in the Victory magazine from Hatebreed that he's like, "What inspired me to start Hatebreed was hearing someone call Quicksand a hardcore band." And I was like, that's not fucking hardcore. And then I
Oh,
wanted to make a band that was the antithesis of Quicksand because
wow.
that was hardcore to me. And I tell that to Walter, and I think Walter like is like, "Yeah, that's not so great," but I think it's awesome. Like if you can inspire someone with both swings of
Yeah,
the
that is
sword.
actually pretty awesome. But I mean, that doesn't work. It's awesome, but also doesn't work with me because I'm not a Hatebreed fan, and I hold Quicksand pretty dear to my heart.
Yeah. I think I love both of them, and I think that's the great thing about it, is because to me, hardcore is Quicksand and it is Hatebreed, and then it's Los Crudos, and then it's Bikini Kill. Like, and they don't like when I say that, but I think Bikini Kill's a hardcore band in their own way, and like
Oh,
I
for
think it's
sure. Yeah, but you have a broad definition though, and like you're an open-minded person.
well, I think it's also just it's just like if you're looking at this thing as this whole thing, like there's some bands I hate, right? There's sounds I hate, like Sonics, and like I try not to say them on the show because I don't want to diminish any part of this thing for people, uh, but like as long as it's like you said earlier, and I now bristle when I say this word because Stephen Merritt got so mad at me for using it the other day on the podcast, but authentic. Um, I vibe, and I mean authentic to the person who's making it and their definition of punk, and I vibe with it. I think it like I don't vibe with it, but it's valid.
Yeah. This leads me to something that you can like you're like qualified to answer as a friend of the guy. So like when I had a day job at the LA Times, I did a lot of watching and YouTube, and you know, like most people have day jobs too.
Yeah,
And when No Warning got back together, like 2016 or I don't know when it was, I had never heard of them before, and I'm not from Canada, so I was like, what? Like I was just like on pucknews.org, and I was like, what's the big hubbub? It seemed like of the day and of the week of the month, that was like a big deal. Um, and then I read a comment, or the comment had a link to the No Warning uh, like major label supposed disaster video, uh, which I was like, I went to, and that was the first thing from No Warning that I listened to. And like on the thing, it was like they were trying to be Linkin Park or Guns N' Roses or something like that. And then I listened to it, and I was a little bit like, my sensibility was a little bit offended because they were a little jackassy in this video. You know what video I'm talking about?
yeah, yeah.
Pretty
I
much
was,
was the Interscope one. But like they were doing the flashing of the tits, which would offended me. Not like I like tits and I'm a feminist, but I'm not like a militant feminist. Like I'm just like, okay, whatever. I just thought that was stupid. And it's offensive to people in a way that I don't like appreciate. Uh, and then they also decided they didn't film themselves in a little club. They filmed themselves obviously opening up for someone in a big place where if you look, the audience aren't going for it. So you're like not fooling anybody. And that kind of made me not like it. But I was like, these guitars sound heavy. They're doing the hardcore mosh riff. And yeah, he started sort of singing like a melodic chorus, but guess what? It's actually kind of catchy and kind of good and really raspy or whatever. But my question is, so I gathered that they were a hardcore band, they did well. Then they got somehow signed to a major label and they put out a disastrous record that everyone hated. And then they broke up. And then enough time passed that they could come back as if there was like their Into the Unknown, like with For Bad Religion, where it was swept under the rug. Like that's my impression of it as a casual observer that knows very little about it. Because I know now that they just every once in a while will play a festival and they're huge and everything. Did I sum them up right, or is there something I missed,
No,
or did people not hate that record?
no,
Like,
people hated it. Oh, definitely, definitely. I think the only thing you left out is the fact, like, which goes back to your point earlier about hardcore sounding like Limp Bizkit now, is hardcore eventually went to where that record is. And as much as those guys disavow that record now, there's people that fucking love that record. And I
I
think if
mean,
that record,
I listened to that song on YouTube actually because I thought of that in asking you about it because I
yeah,
remember how curious about them I was like 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whenever that was. And I watched that video and I was like, I fucking like this song, right? And
it,
I'm not into it. Doesn't that song doesn't sound like Limp Bizkit? It sounds to me like I mean, musically, it's pretty much just like moshy kind of hardcore. It doesn't sound that different than Trapped Under Ice or Terror. It just has a palm muted. It's really just that as a really hooky melodic chorus, and then a sort of super chorus that's even more like hooky. And maybe that's taboo with hardcore guys. I don't. Is
it, it was like the No Warning, um, that whole moment was very weird to kind of watch go down. So, Sum 41 blew up, like blew up, like probably one of the last, the most successful, commercially successful punk band ever from Canada. But also, I think weirdly, one of the last bands that was kind of made by MTV,
yeah.
that I can kind of think of, or certainly up here in much music. But MTV, they had a hot video on MTV, a few
I
hot
know
videos.
it was overnight, seemingly. Yeah.
Yeah, and those guys were all punk kids, like playing in like demo tape core type bands from Oshawa. And then there's this kind of like older indie rock scene, and that has like connections, kind of broken social scene, but slightly older than those people. But and there was this band Treble Charger, and the
Mhm.
lead singer Greg Norrie uh, signed Sum 41 to like a management production deal, and kind of became like the other member, and like was writing with them and really produced that first record. And because that thing hit so big, it was like, what's next? And so they started a company, and the No Warning kids were kids. They were definitely assholes, back then. Like I was friends with them, and I was thinking about this today. Toronto was a very mean scene in general, and they were at a Hooters restaurant, and the Sum 41 guys came in with this Greg Norrie guy to eat at at Hooters, and they started throwing chicken wings at him and fucking with them. And Greg Norrie was like, "That's the next band. Like, what's the next step after Sum 41?" And this was just before that first record came out. So that first record came out, they were already kind of pretty much signed to Greg Norrie and his production thing at that time. And they were already kind of working on their next thing. So they never really, like, they played a little bit on that album, but it kind of came out and they were already focused on like where we're going to go with the sound. And there were a lot of demos and a lot of different kind of like directions the band could have gone, because all those kids could write songs. Like they all were awesome in terms of, like, there was a star quality to these kids. And Motley Crue, The Dirt, I think is a big part of it. I think Sum 41's success for being like bad, like they were like, when those guys have been on the podcast, like they were talking like, yeah, we're a record company would tell us to trash a hotel room, then they pay for it because it made for a good story. Like there was still enough money to throw around. And so No Warning eventually just became this kind of completely different thing. by the time that record came out. They were signed to Linkin Park's label, and the guys from Linkin Park, I think one of them produced the record or was there. I don't really remember.
Were
Uh,
were they popular as a hardcore band? Like they could get 300 people in Toronto kind of thing before that?
for a brief period, like if they had kept going, like they started the hardcore era that I'm my era of hardcore. Like no one in America took Canadian culture seriously back then. Like it was like Avril Lavigne, Bryan Adams, Celine Dion, and this is like a pre-Drake, pre-Broken Social Scene, pre-Death from Above 1979 kind of world. And I think it was also in punk. Like as much as DOA was like the original, like one of the original hardcore bands, and Subhumans are like one of the world's greatest bands. Uh,
SNFU broke through.
SNFU broke through, but that was like a long time before, and then that was like by the time this period was, they were already like on Epitaph. It was kind of like into that period, and No Warning came out, and all the sort of tastemakers on East Coast hardcore internet at that time were like, "This band's fucking amazing," and they would go to the US and play these crazy shows and open for these crazy bands, and like all these legendary hardcore bands loved them. Kind of like what you're seeing now with the Chisel and Chubby and the Gang and that kind of world from England, and how much of these old hardcore guys in America just like are like, this is the shit. But then No Warning, just this sort of like temptation, which is always there, and like those kids weren't rich kids, and all of a sudden you're being told like, we're gonna make you fucking rock stars, and they were kids, and there were drugs, they were straight edge kids, and all of a sudden they weren't straight edge, and there was party to be had, and yes, they ended up just kind of going into that world, making that record, and it just didn't take.
Yeah.
And they broke up. No Warning, they had another band. Ben was roadieing for us on a tour because he had started roadieing for us a little bit, and we had put out the record Chemistry of Common Life, and there was just so many guitar parts that we kind of needed a third guitar player. And also Ben is like, I say this in all honesty, like a much better front person than I am. Like I am a true freak that lucked out and wound up singing on stage. Ben is like a front person that could make it in like, a major label type band. So having him on stage playing second guitar when the rest of the band, like I'm like you, I want the audience to be happy. The rest of the band in Fucked Up does not give a fuck. Maybe Jonah, our drummer, wants the rest of the audience to be happy too. But having someone else that was kind of on my side up front, singing the songs with me, engaging with the audience a little bit, like it really, yeah, like it really helped us kind of through that period. And but yeah, No Warning, I think they disappeared for long enough, and that's the big thing, right? Like you got to tell the world you're breaking up and they're never going to see you again, and then when you come back you're like, hey, we're here and we survived. And so they came
Okay.
back, and like you're saying, hardcore caught up to it, like Trapped Under Ice, Terror, like Scott would admit this. Scott is hugely influenced, even though Scott's like a legend on his own terms. He's hugely influenced by Ben and Ben's vocals and No Warning.
Sure. I mean,
Um,
the bands that's what I'm saying. Like when I watched that video today, I was like, I was like, I know that the song isn't like fitting in what the hardcore guys want, but it's like pretty freaking close to like Terror, or it's not that far.
well, it's like those slight differences, and as time goes on, those slight differences seem much smaller. Like the
Did
difference.
people would people like say they just pulled out that song that I'm talking about that they made the video for at a No Warning show? Would people go for it if they played it?
Oh, now, yeah, I think so. Like because they would be on a bill with like Turnstile and Scowl and
They won't do that.
no, I'm saying they could bust out that song, and that song would go over
Oh, they
huge.
do. I thought you said they disavowed that record.
No, they have as people, because I
They
think at the
play
end of
those
the day,
songs.
pardon me.
They play those songs live. Some of them.
No, I haven't seen No Warning in a long time, but when I last saw them, they weren't playing those songs at all, and like they didn't like that record and kind of the way it turned out. Like I think that was definitely a means to an end musically for them. Um, And not to say that they're still like into like the Maximum Penalty demo and stuff, but like they were listening to like the Flaming Groovies or Oasis and
I mean, he's gone. Yeah, Young Gov couldn't be more different than. I mean, the reason why I asked about No Warning is like a weird thing like that is like I'm so intrigued. Like the Jawbreaker thing, of course, I'm so intrigued by. It's so amazing to me. But also the Duster thing is like kind of like Duster is probably even though I'm from the Bay Area. Do you know Duster? So they're from San Jose, and they were around when Knapsack was around, like 97, 98, 99. They put out a couple of records. And I San Jose is like an hour away from where I'm from and stuff, and played in the same world. And so I never heard of them. I think I might have heard of them and got confused and thought they were Guster, which is a band that was a 90s band I fucking hated. Like a third-rate Gin Blossoms. I love the Gin Blossoms, but like I hate Guster or whatever. Like just I don't even know Guster and I hate him. So like that's a lot about me and my opinions. But anyway, like during the pandemic, Sean, the other guitar player of Samiam, who's been my friend for like we went to college together like 40 years. And he just goes, "Hey, I discovered this band and I think you'd really like them. They're just like have you written all over you." And sure enough, they're like a bedroom band. So they're sort of like Sonic Youth meets Sparkle Horse meets Spill a little bit meets Pavement. Like all the vocals are whispered, but just very like I'm a sucker for really arty indie rock that's not pop song structures if the songs are short. Like I hate prog rock. I hate long shit. I hate indulgent shit. But when it's short, and like same thing with just like Mogwai, like I love Mogwai, but then when they break out a 7-minute song, I'm just like, like you lost me, right? Because it's when it's short, it's concise. The idea is concise. There's not enough time to go up. Anyway, I love this band and stuff, but that was like 2020, and I was like, wow, what a great story. They're all farts, like look like they're in their 50s, and they just like ugly and just like. And I looked at their videos, and they're one of those bands that love shitty equipment, like weird shitty equipment that sounds neat, but like what is that guitar? I don't know. What's that amp? I don't know. Look at that pedal. I don't know what that is. Like, and it looks like shit. They look like shit. They're dressed like shit. But they make like quintessential like my style of music, right? And then I went to go see them. It was like whenever there was a break in the pandemic, they played down here, and there was 1,200 people, and I was like, what the fuck? And it was young people, like young, good-looking people. Like I was like, who are these people and how do they know? And do they looking on the stage? Because these guys look like they're grandfathers. Like, and stuff. And so then I went and looked at their Spotify plays and go, oh shit, yeah. They're like this song has 13 million plays. This song has like 5 million plays. That's why I get it. Numero Group put out their records and it has Second Life. Then flash forward to now, which is like I've loved this band for 4 years. I just go and onto Spotify just to check up. I wonder like how many plays is this Duster thing still happening? Because they haven't played around. Like it's still happening? Is it growing? Do people forget about it? Was this trendy dipshit little kids on TikTok and they forgot about them already? They have songs with like 40 million, 70 million streams. They have like 3.5 million followers, right?
yeah.
And as far as I know, they haven't toured since I saw them 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And I'm just like, they're like they're when I think the wildest irrational dream of what could happen to me in music and like reward I could get for all these years of what could possibly happen and won't happen. Another illusions. It's like Buster is it because when you get 70 million streams, you're on the level. You're not on the level of Sonic Youth. You're not on the level of all these classic bands, Dynasty Jr. Like you're like jumped ahead of all these fucking bands, you know? And I'm just like, you haven't even heard of Duster yet. Like I know from a fact after an hour of being your friend now that you're gonna go listen to Duster because you're like, what? No, this can't be true, or at least investigate them, right? Um, and that's and what I'm getting at is like that's the story. The Jawbreaker story is like I love it. Like I love a spectacular, unexpected success almost as much as I love like a beautiful failure. And my point is, these success stories and Dusters in particular, Jawbreaker too, because I know them and stuff. But Duster is just like I have like complete like it gives me so much pleasure to hear that like those old farts that I didn't even know about and look at what they're doing. Like, oh man, the pleasure. It's almost as good as if it happened to me.
It's like it is like a sweepstakes too, because it just seems to come out of nowhere. Like King Kong and the Shrines had that song that had like 12 million plays on TikTok, and they got all.
That's different though. That and it's good for them to get a little windfall of money. But like Blonde Redhead also got a couple of like big songs because Rick and Morty and shit, right? That like I love Blonde Redhead's one of my favorite bands ever, but they have like two songs that have millions of streams, and the rest are just what you'd expect, a couple million or whatever. Duster just has this giant catalog of streaming. I mean, it's way more like there's more. It might be playlisting, I guess, but I don't think it is. I think it's actual, real, organic. This band divide all odds and are fucking quietly out, like in as far as the music industry is concerned, quietly this huge fucking band against all odds.
I think
When I was quiet, their vocals were so out of key. Like the music was perfect, but the vocals were too loud. So like you could tell like what's going on a little bit. And I'm talking about a band I love too. I'm not trying to criticize them, but I was like, this is so fucking unlikely. How the fuck did they do it? Their music is that good. And actually, I do think their music is that good and they deserve it. But guess what? For every band that's big and I think they deserve it, there's about 100 bands that I think that are forgotten and not big that also think they deserve it, are that good, you know?
Yeah, like for how big Dinosaur Jr. is, and obviously not nearly as big as Duster.
Yeah,
The
how
fact
is that? How is it not?
but then
Yeah,
like Lou Barlow still has to play people's living rooms on
yeah.
tour.
No, I
So it's
know.
like he invented this genre of
Yes,
music,
I
like
know.
lo-fi music, the kids soundtrack, like all this shit. And it's just like sometimes I really wonder like how other people don't see this stuff. Like I look at Jane County, and how is Jane County not celebrated as like this incredible icon of.
Or Jeffrey Pierce or the Gun Club guy. I mean, there's the list is so long of like tragic like cultural missteps, right?
Yeah, or like are you into the like the Flying Nun New Zealand stuff?
No.
Oh my
I,
god.
I'm I'm ignorant of it. I'm not.
No. I'm going to send you a playlist of this stuff because it's like Dunedin in New Zealand, a town of like 100,000 people, and it's something like one in every 100 was in a band at some point, like something crazy. Like the amount of bands that were out of there that were signed to labels or international labels, and there's a sound they call the Dunedin sound, which is like Pavement, Yola Tango, all those people are like, go Super Chunk, like they're all going kind of like in that direction in their own way. But like all these bands are like the greatest band of all fucking time. It's like all of them wrote like at least one all-time song. Like you're just like, this is like the one of the greatest songs I've ever heard in my life.
So you're telling me the Beth snuck through? They're the Duster of New Zealand.
They are connected to that scene in a way too. And there's like oh fuck, I'm gonna fix in the intro. Wax. Oh, I can't believe I'm blanking. They're fucking amazing. They're like a new band that Capture Tracks put out that's on Flying Nun over there. And as Flying Nun goes on, like some people are like, oh, the sound changed. But there's like that first wave, the clean, the chills, the board games, the Verlaines, there's so many, and they're all like, how
Is
do
it
people not know this
like
stuff?
indie pop kind of?
Yeah, yeah. And I don't mean like how do they not know this stuff. I mean like how is this not talked about more so people can know more?
Like the bass player Samiam wears a Saints shirt uh, a lot, and occasionally somebody was like, we were just in Germany, and this guy goes, "Oh yeah," he was English. And he goes, "Oh yeah, the Saints. Oh yeah, I saw that guy play in wherever he's from, like Richmond or whatever in England." And I go, oh, and Chad was like, he goes, "Oh yeah, was anyone there? Like was it a big show?" And he goes, "Oh, like 40. It's like 40 people or whatever." But if you listen, I mean, like to me, the Saints are kind of classic, and they have a couple of songs that are just like like they're just like classic songs or whatever, but they're not remembered, I guess. And it's just you're just like, okay,
Yeah, it's really weird who gets that, their flowers moment, especially like the Saints, because they're like, as much as they're influencing every punk band, like later on, those records are huge influence on Rock from the Crypt and the NXS documentary. Like Michael Hutchison's like a massive fan of theirs and inspired to make music. Nick Cave, I'm sure, is obviously inspired by them too, and like they're there at the same time the Ramones are, and yeah, it just
it's
didn't happen. Or like those Johnny Thunders playing like to no one at different times, and it's
or the
it's just
Wipers.
weird.
The Wipers is another weird one
Yeah,
where
definitely.
how could this not be bigger?
Yeah, especially when like that tribute to the Wipers compilation came out, and I heard Nirvana covering the Wipers, and then you hear the song, and you're like, oh, this is Nirvana. Like this could have been like they have the songs in the way
Yeah.
Nirvana has the songs.
And they also had like sonic bits that are like they're so much more unpretentious than Sonic Youth were, but they go into these little musical things and guitar things where it's like much subtler, but you're like, holy shit, they're treading the exact same uh, like little like bridges and stuff where you're like but they don't get like he doesn't get any due as a guitar player or anything like that at all. With
No,
Wipers, to me, to the average person that's ever heard of them, is like, oh yeah, I know that T-shirt. I always like when I see a guy wearing that T-shirt. I like that T-shirt, right? Because it's like good design. But
and there was that moment I think in the mid aughts, I guess, when that box set came out, that three CD, maybe it was later, like 2000, maybe early mid 2000s, where I think a whole generation of kids discovered them. Uh, Not enough that it's like mainstream in the way it should be, but like that I still think we see their influence on young, not younger bands at this point, but like Waves or the Vivian Girls or like
yeah, oh, for
Fucked
sure.
Up.
Yeah.
Like I think we were all like hearing this band and like I just being blown away by it. And there's people like, and people got it at the time, which is weird because you'd think like they were a band that people must have just not heard, and that's why it didn't catch on. But I guess it's time and place.
I think that also like being from the Pacific Northwest at the time wasn't exactly like the easiest scene to out of. Like going back
And
to
pre
that,
Nirvana thing.
going back to my what was in between Heart and Nirvana. Yeah, I gotta go walk Cheeto. So
Yeah,
I gotta
this has been amazing, and I think
I wanted to end. I wanted to end it with a little story that actually that I don't even think I don't know if I told it to Tristan or I told Tristan to ask me about Sweet Baby when I didn't know if you were going to ask me about Sweet Baby. And that is so like maybe second or third Samiam tour in Europe. We got sort of like placed in a like the wrong show uh where it was Samiam, it was two bands, Samiam and Poison Idea at Fabrik in Hamburg. And it was we just didn't have any supporters in the room whatsoever, like you would expect in 1992. Like Samiam was still new, and Poison Idea was a classic, like true hardcore band. But like while we were playing, there's a balcony. Have you played at Fabrique in Hamburg? I haven't
I
in
don't
years,
think so.
but we did.
No.
It had a balcony, and while we were playing, a guy poured a whole pint of beer on James, the other guitar player, while we were playing. Slow, like a whole pint, because some dribble, and it was a high balcony, and it was mid song, and we just had to sort of get but they were borrowing our bass cabinet, right? And we were scared of them. And then at the end of the show, we were just waiting around to get whatever, like our freaking 300 D marks or whatever. And we were just sort of sitting around, and we looked over at the bass cabinet, and there's all these loogies spat on it, right? And we're like, oh my God, these fucking mean Poison Idea guys are so mean. Not only do they borrow a cabinet and stuff, but they hated us like the audience hated us. So they loogied up our like refrigerator, like the big old bass cabinet or whatever. And this is all us talking and just go, oh God, this was a shitty night or whatever. And then all of a sudden, from across the room, comes walking Jerry, walking across the room, and he has this big smile, and I sort of see it from the side of my eye, and he's looking, and I was like, he's looking over there. Is he looking at us? And he's walking with purpose towards us, and I was like, oh shit! Like I'm gonna get like beat up, or I don't even know what. Like what could this possibly be about? And he comes up and he stops. And he has a really warm smile. And he goes, my name is Sergie Loobkoff, right? That's how you say it. He goes, which one of you is Sergie Loobkoff or whatever, right? Like totally mispronounced, like which is my name. And I like a freaking heat flash goes up my spine. I go, oh shit. And I go, like everyone else is like, and I go, oh fuck. Like I have no idea what this could possibly be like something bad though. And he goes, I just want to say I'm Sweet Baby's biggest fan. Baby, I love you.
That's awesome.
And that was years. That was like 5 years after that band and record came and went and stuff. And like no one knew who that was, but frickin' Jerry from Poison Idea said that. Like he felt compelled and somehow knew. He's probably like a guy like you or me who love music. So he just knew in his periphery that the shitty drummer from that great band, like I didn't have anything to do with what's great about Sweet Baby. It was the two singer guys, which is like really bad at drums, trying to keep up or whatever. But he's like, say the guy, like is in this band called Samiam. Oh, they weren't that great tonight, but I gotta go tell them how much I love that like the obscure record that he put out like a couple years, like 5 years ago or whatever. And I was like, because it was like, because like when I say I was like terrified when he said my name, like it reminds me of another time in Europe when we were on a bus. And I was way in the back bunk, and it was like a later tour because they already had the Civil War, and Yugoslavia was like split up into like Serbia and Slovenia and stuff. We were going through the border either into Serbia or into Bosnia or into Slovenia, and we had a sound guy we knew him through Millencolin, so he lived in Sweden, but he had an Australian accent, and I think he grew up in Australia. And maybe he met them through Body Shop. I'm not really sure, but he was Macedonian, right? So in this bus with a bunch of American people, like probably a German or Austrian driver, bunch of American people, and then a guy named Sergie Loobkoff, like obviously Russian, a guy named Zak Malcheski, right? Who's obviously some other kind of thing. And we're crossing in this recently like parceled up, like former Soviet Union country. And so I was in the back, all of a sudden, like 5 like guys with machine guns and like 2 German shepherds that were not friendly, and a guy in broken English go, "Who is Sergei?" My name's Serioja, actually, it's Sergie, but not Sergei, but erroneously. "Who is Sergei Loobkoff? And who is Zach Malchesky?" And like, it was the same about level of, oh shit, like electricity going through my neck and spine as with Jerry Only goes, "Who is Sergie Loobkoff?" Which is like, "I am, take me to the gulag," or whatever you're gonna do with me. Luckily, it was pre when the Hostel movies came out, or whichever movie it was that was in Eastern Europe where the people got tortured and killed. Because if it was after that, I probably would have had a heart attack and I wouldn't be talking to you tonight.
Well, we could talk forever. You brought more stuff I want to dive into there. We didn't even talk about Millencolin in Sweden and Body Jar in Australia. So
we're gonna have a part 2 someday.
Anytime. This is I think this might be the longest episode ever. I think move over Elgin James. I think we might have a new champ.
Right. The thing about me is that in my real life, I don't talk to myself, and I'm very uncomfortable about talking to myself about myself. I'm the guy that I'm like, everyone says, "Oh, you're such a good listener," right? Because I don't ever talk to myself. Even my dad, I don't talk to myself. And I have troubles communicating with my girlfriend and stuff. And I just rarely talk to myself. If let's go around and everyone tell a little bit about yourself. I fucking get freaked out and stuff. But for some fucking reason of years and years of being a quasi spokesman for Samiam and other bands, I'm really good. I can't sing, so I don't sing, but I'm really good on the mic on stage, and I'm really good at interviews. I wouldn't say great at interviews. That sounds arrogant and dicky, but I'm comfortable. And as a fucking result, because I have all this pent up talk about myself energy, I just start talking because I feel safe. Not a normal interview, only an interview where I know the guy knows something about me, right?
100%. I agree, because I think it's also I have to go to my kids' sports things or school things or like interact with normal people. And I'm not to say like I've worked jobs that aren't with music people, but there is this sort of like I don't want to share about myself, because the stuff I'm going to share, no one's going to get. And like it's not, because this is our culture. This is our religion. This is our thing where we all like this is a place we find salvation and solace, however terrible and fucked up it is at times. But this is the place that offers that to us. And so I think that's why it always feels safe for me. That's why I only do this podcast. Like, people are always like, "Oh, you should do a podcast and interview other types of people and talk about different subjects." It's like, why? No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, if I had, well, I couldn't do what you do just because like I relate well in this context. But if I was on your side and I had to talk to strangers in bands, like I would be very poor at it. I mean, who knows? Maybe I could surprise myself, but I would be just as bad at talking to, "Hey, tonight's guest is Fletcher from Pennywise." I'd be like, like I don't know how to talk to him. But if Fletcher from Pennywise, or I don't know why he came to mind.
He's a very scary dude. Believe me, I've known him very well, and still to this day, every time I'm around him, I'm like, this might blow up in my face.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't mean him in particular. If just anyone in any band, and if I was on the other side, I would not be as like comfortable with it. But for some reason, like I used to hate interviews because the interviews were, "How'd you get your name? How'd you guys meet?" Because like particularly like when we were like in the 90s, when we were in Atlantic, we had to do like those press days where you do like 40 interviews, or not 40, like 15 interviews and stuff. And you're just like a piece of shit. They don't know anything about you. They definitely don't care. And they're just doing their job. So that's a very different thing than doing an interview that I do now. Because now I don't do interviews with anyone ever almost, except for people that like Samiam because or they might like Ways Away or they like Knapsack or not that many people bring up Sweet Baby. It's crazy. Yeah, no one ever brings up Soup, and it's very rare that anyone brings up Sweet Baby. This is a very unusual experience for me in that regard. But yeah, well, like it's something as simple as like say I got a job tomorrow and I had to go in and they did that thing like let's all just say something simple about yourself. I can stand up, I can do this, and I can stand up in front of like thousands of people and say some stupid shit on the microphone, but I will be so freaking nervous just with like if I was in a support group and I said, and it's okay, Sergie, do you want to share? Like, I would be like I would get so nervous. Like, and I also would be I wouldn't be holding my cards tight for any reason. I would just be incapable of sharing. Even when like my dad asked me like, so how was Europe? How did that go? And what stuff? I go, it was great. Yeah, I had a really good time. And I know he wants me to say a little bit more, but like, I just don't feel comfortable talking about myself. It's very odd, I guess. I hate people that talk about themselves all the time. That might be what it is. And I don't want to be misconstrued as a guy that talks about himself. As guys in bands are the worst. Hey man, I got a show on Wednesday. You should come. Fuck you. I would have if you didn't fucking ask me to come, asshole.
I think it's because like also it's like when you come back from tour and people ask you like how did it go, unless it's someone in a band or someone who's like a deep fan of this sort of stuff to know what tour's like, to get into like why it sucks and to get into why it's awesome, it's just completely unrelatable, I think, for a lot of
Yeah, it
people.
would be a laborious I'm sorry, we both got to go, but my dad's gone to see I love my dad. It's not at all capping on my dad or anything, but uh, he went to one Sam I Am show, and it was around 1991, 1992. I was so fucking excited because Sam I Am's opening up for a mythical, my favorite band at that point for like 6 years or whatever, and like my absolute idol. And now, flash forward 30 years later, like still right there. But Sam I Am opened up two bands at a Kennel Club in San Francisco. Sam I Am, Dinosaur Jr. Right.
Oh, awesome.
That's the only time I said, well, maybe he could go to that one. Like, I'm not going to take him to Gilman. I'm not going to take him to an empty, we're headlining at some shitty San Francisco 21 Over Club. I'm not going to take him to anything really punk that's not Gilman. So he came, we played, we kind of sucked. Like, it just didn't go well. And the audience was there to see Dinosaur Jr. And it wasn't that crowded. It was like, it was right when Donna joined the band. It was kind of a weird time. Like they were getting signed soon. I think the Wagon had already come out, but like that show wasn't that big. It was maybe like 300 people or whatever. And I walk over because I have to say something to my dad. And the day I turned 17, my brother and I turned 17 till he had a stroke, maybe like 7 years ago. We were kind of separated from my dad. My dad went and lived his life and stuff. And I don't say that I don't say that like I got abandoned. It was sort of like we sort of just drifted apart, but like it was implicit that we loved each other, but we were not in our lives well. And that was like just in the beginning, the first couple of years of like of being sort of separated from my dad in large part. But I walk up and I didn't know what to do because I was like, I know we sucked. And like, what is he going to say? And I almost feel bad to make him have to say anything. But all he could muster was, and like I said, this was like the best club we had ever played at, the Kennel Club, which is not, it's the Independent. I think you might have played the Independent.
Yeah.
But it was before it was called the Kennel Club. All he could muster was, he looks around and he goes, wow, you must play in a lot of really dumps. right? And like I said, it was the best that we had ever played by miles. Compared to Gilman, it was like a real professional thing. And all I could muster in response was, because we had been to Europe once or twice before that, I go, yeah, well, when we played in Europe, we played much nicer places, which was a total lie. And then after that, I don't think we talked about me being in a band or any reference. We would like for years we talk like once a year. Sometimes we skip a year, like because and it's not because we had any rift. It was just like he was living his life and he lived in other places and I was living my life. Um, and then we just didn't talk. It's as if I wasn't in a band for 20 years. And then we got a lot closer. He got a divorce and then had a stroke about 7 years ago, and it brought us way closer. And now like we're way closer. And now he's like, I think he thinks it's kind of neat. He doesn't think it was a total waste of time. And it's totally terrible. Oh, you might think it's terrible. I don't know how much he's ever listened to it, but he'll actually ask, like, how was Europe, or how was South America, or how was Japan? Or it's like, it's really neat that you get to do all this traveling. Like, he actually said that about it. And one time, I think Sasha just said something, or he goes, how much did you get paid in last week? And I go, oh, it was a really good one. But my dad, who doesn't respect the way of a musician or an artist, like he's more like traditional about like how a man should make his money. He was actually perked up. He goes, "Wow, that much? Huh? Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah."
Well, because like if you're not from this world, like it's insane that we make something. And obviously your shit resonates way more than mine, but like we make something that resonates around the world. And we can go around the world and people pay to see us act a fool on stage and it means something to them. And yeah, like the amount of times I have to tell someone, not necessarily in my family, but certainly like people I interact with, like, yeah, no, we actually don't pay to go and play when we go away. Like it's not
Yeah,
it's not a vacation. Like it's not not something I would do otherwise right now.
my grandparents like survived the Holocaust. Like my grandma's mother died in Auschwitz, and they both had to pick up their life penniless and separately. Their families uh, went to South America, and then they became very successful and super like success like focused, especially when they talk to their grandkids and stuff. Uh, and they were old, elderly, so I don't even know how aware of me playing music they were or whatever. But every time I said I went on tour, they'd always ask me, was it a success? Right? And I always go, it was a really great success, right? And it was. But if I told them how little money I split up, they would be like heartbroken, or they would be like, we need to have an intervention with Sergie about what he's doing. Like he shouldn't be doing this. Um, and then one more time, my grandfather told me something that was like jaw-dropping uh, revelation. Because I thought he just thought like I was spinning my wheels and wasting my time. But because he went, like he was a boxer and a doctor in Austria. The Nazis came, and then he was like a dishwasher and a fuck up in not Ecuador, in shit. I'm not sure what country he was in. My mother's side went to Argentina. But anyway, and then he came here and he just like slaved and like became very successful and stuff through ingenuity and stuff. But he left boxing, like he wasn't a boxer and he wasn't a doctor even actually either. he was a salesperson, and he just went for the money. And like I said, they were very like money upset. When I did something wrong, my grandmother would always joke, "You're fired." And at the time, I thought it was funny, but now I'm like, they were so fucking money focused after what they went through in their life, and so like success focused that they would tell a kid you're fired because this concept of like work, and it was so ingrained in their worldview. But my grandfather pulled me and my brother aside and said, and this is when we were maybe like 20, 18, I don't know. It's just like, I got to tell you, in my opinion, fuck off, do whatever you want. And he meant like whatever you want. He wasn't like saying do heroin and whatever, but fuck off, have fun till you're 35, right? And he said that with levity, right? Like do whatever. But when you turn 35, like the day you turn 35, playtime's over and like get serious. And I was just like, all this time, I thought he was really thinking like, what a fuck up you are for the little that he knew that I did with Sam, like being in a band and stuff. Like I'm sure he thought it was cool that I went to Austria, like I went to Vienna or whatever, and stuff, and Japan or whatever. But in general, I'm spinning my wheels and wasting my time and not focusing on being a real success, which is making a lot of money and having a nice house and everything. And then he revealed to me that, what he was really telling me is like, you got to get serious and do everything I always say about this being successful or adopt this attitude. But what he's really saying is like, after all the shit that I went through and my family and everyone I know went through with the Holocaust and being like a refugee and stuff, there's one thing I learned like about what's absurd about life is like, have some fun when you can. That's what he was really saying. And I was so fucking shocked to hear that from him. And it like really suited me well because, you know, like particularly when Samiam was on Atlantic, that was a very unhappy period of my life because we had a couple of successes, but in general, it was just very, so suddenly my hobby playing music turned real serious from a livelihood standpoint. And I really questioned, what am I doing with my life? Like, and like, oh, this like, it was stressful or whatever, because that was the only time I depended on Samiam for money and stuff. And to hear that from him, it was kind of like mind blowing to hear that from him and from what like he went through in life and the perspective that gave him or whatever. I told that to Jesse, the singer of Ways Away, my band my current band that I talked about before, who's at that age. I think he's 36 now. And I think blew his mind too, even though he never met my grandfather or anything. But until someone tells you something like that, like you have no perspective in anything. You're just confused and worried. Oh my God, I'm a loser. Like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, and if someone tells you that, yeah, it was amazing. But he still didn't say like, I'm really patty about being in a band or anything. It wasn't that. It was something actually way more profound than if he said that, you know? Like, the Samiam thing is actually kind of worthwhile. Oh, that's nice, Opie, that's what I call them. But actually what you really said was way more like life-changing or profound or gave me a little bit of weird validation, or I don't even know how to explain how profound that was to me. Like I was like, my jaw dropped when he said that to me, right?
Well, I'm proud of you for Sweet Baby Jesus, for Bugger All, for Sam I Am, for dozens of things you've done. And anytime you want to come on here and talk about any of this stuff, like it's great to meet someone who just, you know, kind of is as passionate about this shit as I am. So please come back.
Yeah, whenever put me on your short list of when someone falls through. The return of Sergie Loobkoff